Hello. This is Measure GS Oversight Committee meeting. Measure GS Resident Oversight Committee meeting in Santa Monica, California on October 6th, just for record. And they do have an audio recording of this meeting, but I'm recording it just to make sure everybody can see what's going on with this committee and the taxes that we're supposed to oversee. There's about $22 million, there's more than $22 million sitting in an account right now that need to be used to help people stay in housing and to housing, and also to help get more people in housing here in Santa Monica. So I hope you get involved and tell your leaders, affordable housing now, housing is a human right. So, all right. Thank you. It's about the best picture we're going to get.
Thank you very much.
That's right. I'm Harvard. Very good. Great to meet you.
Oh, really?
I know. I'm like, I was figuring out what I got to figure back.
This feels like a good job.
Yeah.
So you've been on this since the beginning.
We reported it was ever.
Oh, you're on the top. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I keep asking. Which on? I guess you'll introduce yourself.
Yes.
Where's your partner?
No, is it really? Wait, what's more right now?
Nobody on base. No, it's one on second.
Sorry, that's for sure.
No, it's not.
What did you say this is for?
Now we're gonna have to find out. And then I guess you
Yeah, let me know when you guys are ready.
It was such a good game the other day.
Ready? Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. This is the October 6th meeting of the GS Oversight Committee. We'll start with agenda item 1, public input on non-agenda items.
Sorry, we just need to do roll call first.
Oh, we have to do roll call first. Okay, sorry, I missed that. Call to order, roll call. So we'll do the roll call first.
Mark Hertler,
Here.
Renee Buchanan, present. Anujan Jivaprakash, Wade Kelley, here. Wessel, here. Milan Ramsey, Samuel Shapiro Klein, here. Amy Anderson,
Here.
Michael Solo.
Here. Okay, that completes the roll call. Item 1, public input on non-agenda items. Seeing no members of the public in attendance, we'll move on to item 2. Public.
We're sorry, we have written public comment. 2 of them submitted, they're in everyone's pack. One of them was from member Kelley, another was from a member of the public about potentially a new state law about joining remotely in the future in 2026, but both of those comments are in everyone's pack.
Okay, item 2, public input on agenda items under special agenda, et cetera, with no members of the public. There's nothing to do there. Item 3, special agenda items. A, City Manager Oliver Chi, introduction to the Measure GS Committee. The City Manager expressed his regrets but was unable to make tonight's meeting. So we'll move on to B, which is swearing in of the Measure GS appointees. And so with the 4 appointees who are joining the commission, please stand. All of you would raise your right hand, and if you would read the oath together.
I, Mark Hertler, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I will faithfully
Great, thank you. You are all now official members of the committee.
Yes, I'll take that at the end.
Okay, so hang on to the turn in at the end. Okay, now we're on item C, discussion and overview of the Measure GS Oversight Committee and its scope. I think before we get into discussion of what people understand we're going to be doing here, what we did at our first meeting was had each of the members just very briefly say who they were and why they were here. And it seems to me that with 4 new members, it makes sense for us to do that again. So maybe we could just go around the table, starting with Mark.
Thank you. My name is Mark Berkler. I live in the Sea Colony, just down the ways. I'm a relatively recent president. I spend a lot of time volunteering on boards and commissions. The last government position I held was the chair of the Community Development Block Grant process in Huntington Beach. Looking forward to getting to know everyone better and do some great work.
Great. David, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is David Goldsman, and I grew up in Santa Monica. Although I didn't go to high school here now because of the fire, I would have gone to high school here because Palisades and Santa Monica High School adjoined. I went to Palisades High School, Lincoln Middle School, and all the other schools before that. So this is the first kind of commission board I wanted to sit on because kind of the challenges that the city is experiencing. I don't know, I can personally make a difference. Have a different outlook on certain things because over the years, the city has drastically changed, and something that used to drive the city for many years was tourism, and now tourism dropped probably 90% from my eyesight. I don't know the official statistics, somebody is probably gonna give a better number, but from my eyesight and from just walking down Third Street Promenade, the vacancy rate looks to be at least 70%. So that means business incentives to operate a business in Santa Monica. And that poorly affects the city. So hopefully something can be done about it. I don't know directly, per se with this committee, but, some other housing challenges per se could be handled better.
Great. Okay. Mr. Pierce, Wade, you're next.
Hi, my name is Wade Kelley, and I was born in Culver City, just down the road. I've lived all over the country. I went to the Second City Training Center when it was in Santa Monica. I performed at the Upfront Comedy Club for years that was on the promenade, and for the last 10 years I've been performing on the promenade, and I've been peacefully protesting there and advocating for the homeless for the last 5 years, I'd say. I've seen the way that the promenade has changed, and it's pushed all the poor people off the promenade, and it's made it harder for homeless people to survive in this city. And the business owners want to blame it on the poor people and homeless people, but Santa Monica needs to do a better job of building affordable housing and stand up for human rights. We need to show that progressive government can make a difference in people's lives and help lift people out of poverty. And Santa Monica needs to be part of that solution. For generations, Santa Monica has pushed the poor people down the road, and when you do that, you push people of color out of your city. For bad democracy makes for a bad community of only rich people, business owners and property owners being able to take part in your democracy, and that's a terrible thing. And we need to show that we are different than authoritarian government. Thank you.
It's hard to follow that. Amy Anderson. I am a resident of Santa Monica. I've been here about 20 years. I am professionally involved in affordable housing. I'm a developer of affordable housing for a nonprofit organization. I've spent most of my career in that space. I served on the city's planning commission for a good handful of years. And I guess, like, from a vision point of view, I really feel like this is a community that has a lot of services and opportunity to offer to people, and that creating affordable housing is a way to welcome more people and give them access to those sorts of opportunities.
I'm Mike Soloff. I was one of the official proponents of Measure GS. I've lived here for 32 years. My wife and I briefly lived in the Pacific Palisades, and we briefly lived in Brentwood. And then we came here because we wanted to live in a community that was not an economically gated community. In Santa Monica was that. And the economic pressures as things have become more valuable, more expensive, has really put some pressure on that. So one of the ways of trying to fight back against that is to have money, create affordable housing, to provide rent subsidies and other things to our existing residents so that we can maintain as much economic diversity as possible. And that's what I'm hoping that we, through this commission, can help work with staff and with the city council to try and come up with the best ideas to make the money we have go as far as possible towards those goals.
I'm Milan Ramsey. I am Santa Monican. I was born in St. John's Hospital, went to Franklin Lincoln Sammo. Got my degrees, my higher education degrees in Minnesota, and then spent my first years with my master's of social work working in public schools. They are providing mental health for kids, and spent my volunteer time working in a family shelter. And so this committee really speaks to all of the areas that I spend my paid and unpaid time caring about. So it really fits for me. And yeah, housing is important. Seeing people as humans, all people as humans, is important. And providing the social work perspective to this is something I was kind of excited to be able to do. Is like the human side and the professional side merging, so that we can solve these problems more holistically and maybe creatively too, hopefully.
I'm Sam Shapiro-Klein. I'm a relatively recent resident of Santa Monica, 2 years. I wanted to join the GS committee because I'm very concerned about housing affordability and housing stability for residents, as well as homelessness prevention as a really important area to address. I'm excited that we have an opportunity to really address these issues in GS funds, and I think it's important to view with concern over how we can use it most effectively. So I'm excited to be president of the oversight committee with you all.
Bruce, I've lived here for more than 30 years. I'm a lawyer, and I wanted to help kind of digest all the information. I've read all the reports many times, so if anyone wants a summary, I can do it. Go through that. And we set up a subcommittee, and I worked on the subcommittee about the Right to Counsel program and the flexible financial assistance program that would help people who needed help with their rent and other things. And I think we can be, as a group, we can help the city council, which of course has lots to do and doesn't have as much time as we have to focus on this one issue, and also help the staff spend the money that GS is bringing in a way that's effective and gets the job done, and hopefully does that more quickly than it's been, since we're coming up on the 3rd anniversary of GS, and some of the programs that are good programs are still in their infancy. So
introductions because we have 4 new members, so if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Renee Buchanan. I'm here in San Monica. I apologize for being late. I'll just be honest, I have COVID and I'm sort of messing with my memory. So, it's okay, fine, I got it. And I was formerly on the housing division. Very wonderful.
Hi, good evening. My name is Natalie Berlinich. I'm the housing manager. I oversee the housing division, which includes Santa Monica Housing Authority, as well as production preservation, compliance, several of our programs. So thank you for being a member of the committee.
Hi, my name is Allison Crosby, and I serve as the manager of our homeless prevention and intervention team here at the city division within the Housing and Human Services Department. We'll be presenting to you all later in the conversation, but really excited to be and work with you all and thinking and brainstorming and having feedback on how we can improve things for folks here.
Hi everyone, my name is T. Martin. I use they and he pronouns, and I'm one of the senior analysts on the HPI division, which we'll be sharing about tonight. As a bit of background, I'm a social worker by trade as well, and some of my first jobs in social work were working for providers like Step Up 1 Second, doing case management with folks experiencing homelessness. And yeah, I've been on the city team. I interned during grad school, been here for over a year now. And yeah, I've loved civic engagement, so I've loved spaces like this, and I'm really excited to work together to implement these funds to support the San Monica community.
And I'm Thomas Philbin. You've seen my name on emails. Good to see everyone in person. I was a staff assistant with the Housing and Human Services Department in the City of Santa Monica in month 5, and having a lot of fun. And I am here kind of link between the city and the committee. I support 4 other boards and commissions for the City of Santa Monica, and I'm happy to be here. See you on the first Monday of every month at 6 o'clock here.
So yeah, just so everybody's clear. So Natalie, go by Thomas or Tom?
Tom works. Thomas is good too.
Which do you like?
Call me Thomas.
Okay. So Thomas and Natalie are regularly at our meetings. We also, from time to time, I guess, but you'll see them at all. So one other thing, I think Sam saw an earlier meeting for those of us who were here when there were just 6 of us. We were very informal, but now that we have such a large group, we are going to ask people if you want to speak, please raise your hand and wait until you're recognized by the chair or vice chair before speaking. So I think now we're going to make a presentation, Natalie, so let's let her make the presentation, and then if you want to ask questions or make comments, if you'll raise your hand at the end, we'll make sure we get to everybody.
Can everyone hear me at this level? Just checking. Okay. So for those that are new, this is the very similar presentation to the first meeting back in June, July? June. I was like, it's a pop quiz for those that have been on the committee. So again, welcome to the Measure GS committee. We're now in October. Like I said, we've only been meeting since June or July. I believe it was June. So just a quick, I'll go through this just pretty briefly, but happy to dig in and answer any questions on anything. But just a brief background on Measure GS. It was approved by the Santa Monica voters in 2022. It's a transfer tax on property sales or transfers that are over $8 million. So that means anytime a property within the city is sold that is over $8 million, there is a transfer tax that is applied to that, which is Measure GS, that is applied. The first one is the Homelessness Prevention and Affordable Housing Fund, also known as the HPAH fund, and also creates a new school fund. So of the new revenues that come in, the first $10 million of the received funds goes towards the school fund. So that goes back to the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District. The next 40 million after the 10 million goes to the city into the HPAH fund. And then any funds that are over $50 million in revenues is split 20% towards the school funds and 20% towards the homelessness prevention and affordable housing fund. So the committee, which you all are members of, that city council has appointed all of you as part of the resident oversight committee to provide recommendations to city council on guidelines of how to use the fund, allocation of the annual funding among programs. And as you know, the committee has 11 members with various requirements for it, and for all the new appointees, you are now serving 4-year terms. And the committee at its first meeting did decide to meet every month, but the measure does say that the committee shall meet at least 6 times annually. And then just for the, really brief, the scope of the committee, as I mentioned, is to go over the guidelines, the funding allocations, and also an oversight of the funds themselves. At the first meeting, the bylaws were established, so the agenda is set monthly between the chair and the vice chair, which is Chair Michael Soloff and Vice Chair Amy Anderson. If you have requests to be, an item to be added to the agenda, that speaks to the bylaws, which, Thomas, are the new committee members, they received those bylaws?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'll get a copy.
We'll be sending a copy, but there is a deadline for the chair and the vice chair to submit that to them for their consideration of whether or not that will be part of the agenda. And the agenda goes out a week before the meetings, that's the timeline. And then again, as a Brown Act is a body of 11. The Brown Act, for those new committee members, you'll receive a training on that, but you just need to be careful with emailing and communicating that you never have more than 5 people on an email.
Quorum or more. So
Quorum or
less
more,
than
which
6.
is 6. Getting used to the math for 11, excuse me. Oh.
Wait a second. It has to be less than the majority.
Less than quorum.
So you plus 4 other people, if you're talking about something that's that either is on our agenda or maybe coming on our agenda in the future.
Correct, yes. Thank you for that clarification. But again, you will be receiving Brown Act training if you haven't already received it. If you have questions about Brown Act, you can also just ask your chair, your vice chair, myself, or Thomas as well. So the funding parameters is laid out in the measure. I'll just summarize it very quickly. So no more than 6% of the funds can be used for compliance, implementation, or administration. No less than 30%, but no more than 50% shall be used for ongoing or emergency income assistance. And those household seniors, minor children, persons facing physical or mental challenges shall have priority in the programs funded. And lastly, no less than 50% shall be used to acquire, rehab existing rental housing or to create new deed-restricted affordable housing. And I believe Thomas will be providing the measure ballot, or is it linked in the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. So for those that want to dig deeper, the ballot measure is actually in the agenda. And then lastly, any remaining funds may be used for tenant preservation programs and services. And then the key important part for these funds is that these funds should be in addition to and not a replacement of any funds that the city otherwise would have provided for those programs. These funds can't be used towards a program that was already funded by the city that the city wants to utilize those funds for something else. Like, you can't take away funds to supplement. I don't know if I described that very well. But, and then just a key overview of the housing division, which is the division I oversee, the existing programs, and then Allison and T are also here to provide a separate presentation the HPI division. But the housing division oversees the voucher program, which is from the Housing Authority, as well as tenant-based rental assistance from federal home dollars. The division also oversees the Preserving Our Diversity or POD program, which is a cash assistance program for seniors who are living in rent-controlled properties. And we also oversee the below-market housing waitlist, which is the waitlist for majority of the affordable housing residences within the city. The development of city-owned sites, which has been identified in the housing elements, housing trust funds, investment towards affordable housing, the preservation of affordable housing, and as well as I mentioned, the oversight of the city's inclusionary housing program. So similar to when I gave this presentation back in June, just considerations for this committee is, how these funds could potentially help out with these considerations. So first, we are also right now in a federal shutdown, but there is uncertainty about and the potential of impacts for HUD funding outside of shutdown. So those that have vouchers, we are okay, but outside of the shutdown, with HUD, there's been uncertainties just about the voucher and rental assistance programs, the development of the new renter protection programs and the flexible financial assistance programs. And then also the city recently adopted the homeless strategic plan, and there are programs that are identified in there that may be eligible also for Measure GS as well. I believe T, are you just, okay, so T will be giving a very brief overview on the renter's protection, so I won't jump too much into this, but this was adopted in March of 2025. There's two programs, the Right to Counsel program and the new Flexible Financial Assistance program, which uses, both of those programs will be using Measure GS funding. It was the first year allocation of the income assistance and the tenancy protection services. And T will speak more to that during their presentation. The other uses that have been for Measure GS funds is the creation of T and Allison's division, which is the homeless prevention and intervention team. So there's the new HPI manager, and then also a new senior HPI analyst, as well as also a new senior housing specialist who will act as a housing navigator for the city voucher holders. And then lastly, these are the revenues that have been received to date. I only included the total revenues to the fund as, thanks to the chair and the vice chair, calling, flagging the percentages and how it was broken down. There are conversations right now with staff to make sure those adjustments. So I'm right now just including the total revenues as those adjustments are being made. So the first year, there's a little less than 18 million that was received. Second year, about $14.2 million. And then this year to date, through, it says October, but we only received through August data right now. It was 5.936650, and these are all taking out already the $10 million from the school district. So to date, we have received a little over $38.2 million. So there were two transactions in August that were just over, total over $1 million that were received as part of that. And I believe there were a handful in July as also. So with that, that's the brief overview. Happy to answer any questions. Again, there's also HPI teams here to also just give an overview of their division to help inform the committee as we're moving forward with recommendations for the Measure GS funding.
Okay, so before we go on to that, I think you have questions or comments on what we've just seen from that. So I was going to say something. Are there others? Just so we can get the list here. So
I'm making the list.
okay. And we have Mark, David, Bruce, and Wade. Okay? And I'll just make one comment, but the clarification, which I'm glad you raised there, is the way it's written is that you take the administration off the top, and then those things that say like 50% minimum for affordable housing, it's 50% what's left after you take the administration off the top, not
And-
50% total.
And I will share, you can't read that, I know that. This is what previously in June it showed. However, as Michael mentioned, these allocations were adjusting to match the ballot measure as it reads. So this is incorrect, but this is the most up-to-date total revenue received.
Okay, so I guess we have Mark first on the list, so take it away, Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. How does the mansion tax and the transfer tax, how do they fit together and not fit together?
Okay, can I respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the mansion tax is a name that was informally given to what's happening in Los Angeles.
Right.
That's not here, we could campaign it that way or label it, whatever.
So it's an.
So are you asking about
It's
how
an
does?
LA specific.
Yes, so that's measured ULA, which actually that's kind of a misnomer.
So
Oh.
that doesn't apply in Santa Monica, the
Correct.
transfer tax applies in Santa Monica.
Correct. Our measured GS, they're both transfer taxes. It's just that the percentages and the dollars at which they kick in and the exact spending programs are different. And if you're interested in what's going on in LA, I'd be happy to offline to share
That's where
information.
I moved from, so I know exactly what's going on.
Ah, okay. So we have our own program here that's guided by our criteria, which are somewhat different than LA's, but they're both transfer taxes.
Transfer tax. Thank you.
Okay, so then David, you're next.
Okay, this was, I just want to make a comment that it was interesting. Do you know the percentage of the transfer tax? Like, let's say somebody sells a house or transfers it for $8 million. Is there a percentage, like they pay a transfer tax of 5%, 8%? What is the percentage?
Okay, so that's one to that.
No, I mean, it's just a question because like
You can
Kelley
answer it.
County, the percentage is like.
Yeah, no, I was just which one of us was going to give you the answer.
Oh, okay.
So it's simpler here in Santa Monica than in Los Angeles. Any transfer for $8 million or more, the tax that's the measured GS tax is 5%. Now, there's already a base tax of 0.6% that people pay up to $8 million, and that's a slight simplification because at a very low level, it's less than that. But by the time you get to anything that kicks in for measured GS, they're paying a general 0.6% to the city's general funds, and 5% goes into the two funds that you saw there, the school fund and the homeless prevention affordable housing fund.
Okay, thank you. The other comment I was gonna make is, I run a consulting firm and we help a lot of nonprofits that work with dealing with interim housing for the homeless. So I was wondering, is that kind of similar to what it is with the housing division, how it is in Los Angeles County? Basically, the Department of Health Services provides these nonprofits contracts based on the number of beds they have, and gives them a contract based on what type of, how many beds and the types of services they're provided, whether it's like recuperative care or just kind of in and out for the night, or I don't know if I'm
Second
describing
part
it
of
correctly.
your presentation, so that's gonna come up
Oh,
on
okay.
the next
Sorry.
agenda. No, it's fine.
I can
But
answer,
I
You want to answer
I
that,
can
or-
answer generally in the sense that of what HPI will be presenting on and what is kind of its standard practice. Natalie, interrupt me at any point if I'm incorrect. I'm 2 months into my tenure here, so I need a little grace. But for the Human Services Division and the Housing, or the Homeless Prevention and Intervention Division does subcontract with providers to do direct services, a variety of different types. And so we'll get in, at least for HPI, we'll get into the details of what some of those subcontracted services look like and who the providers are in our presentation.
Oh, okay.
And I generally, yes.
Okay, it's just the different department
Yeah.
names versus what LA County was, and that's why
Yes.
was my.
And I'll also just add to the city in the past has also helped in the support of some interim housing options as well and the development of it. I believe it's local.
Yeah. I was just gonna say is before, I know when COVID just started, I think like in 2020, the city, I think provided like a hotels or something like that for those type of services to house people that are, were experiencing homelessness. And I don't know, the follow-up to that would be, are they still doing that? Is there, if we have so many more homeless people, are they, are we providing enough, to give people an opportunity, if they want to have a place to go or call home?
So do we want
So
to?
why don't we let the presentation occur, and then we'll have a discussion of that. It's not just being persnickety, but technically, when you're talking about an agenda item, we should discuss things that germane to that particular agenda item, and then we'll get to the next one. So I think,
I'll be
hold that question,
I'll work that answer into my presentation.
and we'll do that. Okay, so Bruce, you're next.
So the last thing you have in your package is this thing with 4 boxes. So Natalie, if you could just explain, there's housing, human services, and HPI.
Am I looking at the right thing? Okay. Oh, yeah.
And last time, I guess, the last discussion we heard from Natasha, but just to go through, I guess Allison and T are both in HPI, but what each of these does, and then a related question, I know there's another committee and another tax, the Transient Opportunity Tax. Are they governed? Do people here work on any of that, or is that some other purpose?
That's the first time, but I can follow up with that.
That's not.
That's not ours, yeah, I think finance overseas. We can look at it. Here, I'm happy to walk through. So this is the org chart that, the Housing and Human Services Department, which is a relatively new department. I think we're on our 2nd year. So Heather Averick is our director. She oversees the entire department. And there's now 3 divisions within Housing and Human Services. So the first is HPI, or Homelessness Prevention and Intervention Division, which Allison and T are a part of. I believe there's 5 other staff. And we'll be hearing from them to give a little bit more of the overview. Human Services Division is overseen by Natasha Guest-Kingsgoat, and that oversees our Human Services grant program. Thank you. And so the Human Services Grant Program provides funding across the city for social services, child care subsidy, homelessness, senior programs, a whole range of programs, and that's a 5-year contract that happens every 5 years, or 4 years. I'm getting caught this year, sorry. And that one, the new RFP for that, I believe, is coming out next year. And then the Human Services Division also oversees the PAL and the CREST program, as well as the Virginia Avenue Park programs. And Ramsey, I'm looking at you because you used to be a member of Human Services. I think those are all the programs from Human Services, right?
Yeah, they have I think you alluded to this, but their programming has a lot more focus on the youth and families population, as to where HBI, our division, as we'll talk about, focuses primarily on single individual adults who are experiencing homelessness. So that's kind of like one division between the two.
And Human Services and HPI used to be one division, and they were split just in July. So still,
And will the GS money be overseen by both of them or just one of them?
it's being overseen by both of them. So the Right to Counsel program, which again, T will give a little brief overview, which is a Measure GS funded, the expansion, is being overseen by the HPI division, and the FFA, which is the Flexible Financial Assistance Program, which is also funded with Measure GS funds, will be overseen by the Human Services division. And then the Housing division, the last division, is the division I oversee. That includes the Santa Monica Housing Authority, which has 6 voucher programs. We serve about 1,800 participants monthly. We also oversee the production and preservation of affordable housing, the POD program, which is the Preserving Our Diversity program, which is cash-based assistance for seniors in rent-controlled properties. We also oversee the below-market housing wait list and compliance and implementation of the city's inclusionary housing program. And those are the 3 divisions. Thank you, Bruce.
Senator Bruce? Yes. So Wade, you're next.
Now that we mentioned voucher programs, now is the Section 8 voucher program part of the thing that you oversee?
Yes, that's
And
for
they
the Santa
ended
Monica.
they ended the list, they stopped the list. Is there a way that we could use money from Measure GS to help open that list for Section 8?
So the list is very long, which is why we closed it. We had 40,000 members on that wait list. That folks that lived not only in Santa Monica that lived to work, but because we're a housing authority from across the nation. These Measure GS funds can definitely be used towards ongoing income assistance. Could be used for that, or similar to like an expansion of the Preserving Our Diversity program as well.
So the Section 8 housing here in Santa Monica, the list, you can join the list from all around the country?
Any housing authority wait list in the country, you do not have to live or work in that city, but there's priorities or preferences that are applied to that wait list.
And
But-
you have
Just to
preferences?
be clear, that's federal.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it's a
understand
federal,
it's a federal program. You can't use it to help house the people that are homeless in your city.
So, so we have a few different wait lists. So there's the general Section 8 wait list that was, all of our wait lists were closed. But that had, at the time of closing, over 40,000 members on that wait list. That's still, wait list is still available. We're just not accepting new applications at this time, but we also have a permanent supportive housing wait list that was created when the Laurel was leasing up, because there's project-based vouchers as well there. And so we're using that wait list as well as also there's other mechanisms, that we're using to house homeless within Santa Monica. And I believe, I don't want to give too much preview, are you all speaking to that, or to what? Maybe not.
To like a homeless specific voucher program?
Yeah.
Not really.
Not really, okay. And then we also have the Continuum of Care voucher, known as the COC vouchers, which we are actively using those to lease, to provide opportunities to those who are chronically homeless in Santa Monica.
So just to follow up on that.
Yes.
Am I correct, Natalie, that the reason you're closing the list is because for all practical purposes, anybody joining the list at this point has no realistic chance of getting it, it's somewhat misleading.
Correct.
I believe that they do.
Correct, so we closed it earlier this year, and we had done analysis on who in the last few days, or not, last few months of that time were actually applying for the wait list, and very few of them were actually living or working in Santa Monica. And correct, if anyone who had joined at that point would have been waiting years, if not decades, to be pulled off the wait list.
I think you touched on something else there that 100% was clear to everybody. The federal law does allow us to give certain preferences. We have to take applications from everybody, but federal law allows us to give certain preferences for people who either live here or work here. Is that correct? And
Correct.
we, in fact,
Yes, so we do
preferences.
apply a live-work preference. We also have a displacement preference as well. So any Santa Monican who lost their residence in the last 12 months, and their residence had to be in Santa Monica, would be eligible also for a displacement priority as well.
So, but we can't, but federal law does not allow us to say only people who live here, but not people who work here. That, we're not allowed to do that under federal law.
So how many different lists are there?
So we have the below market, there's two lists. I think of the lists in two fashions. So the below market housing wait list, we'll say is here.
Is that the
It's-
senior housing also, or just any below market?
It's any below market. That's the wait list for the physical unit itself. And then that unit or residence is affordable, not at market rates. The Section 8 or the Housing Authority wait list are for the subsidies themselves, for helping to pay across the city, any type of residence within the city. And within the Santa Monica Housing Authority, there are also project-based waiting lists, but again, that's within the envelope of the Housing Authority wait list.
So there are only really two.
There's only really two. So one is for the physical residence, and the other one is for the subsidy. That
So
may
there's
or
not
may
a
not be
separate-
tied to a residence.
There's not a separate low-income senior housing list and a below-market housing list for any age or any need. I'm trying to.
I know, this is where technically there is a senior housing wait list for the project-based vouchers that lives within the Section 8 wait list. I don't know if I complicated that.
Can I also just say, like, and if there was a physical building, right, that was restricted to seniors, effectively out of that wait list would come a senior wait list, right? Because if a building is restricted to seniors, then, right, like, then you have to pluck up the seniors.
Just like there's
So it's not
often
so much
other
a list
requirements, such as what level of income you have. So if it's a unit that's restricted for people making 30% of their median income from law, if you make more than that, you may be higher on the list, but you don't qualify. So you wait till you get to somebody who qualifies for whatever the restrictions are in that unit. That would be the first person who does it. But they
I
don't
see.
break it out into
More the
dozens of
complex
different lists.
and the unit restrictions instead of the
Correct.
list. I see.
Thank you.
So you're next, Dave.
I'm next, and I apologize if I'm like speaking out of turn, but I'm kind of just like taking the opportunity of Natalie's reiterating the presentation that we got at our first meeting to say, you know, we've spent, the committee, before the new members joined, have spent the last couple of meetings trying to get really kind of a lay of the land of existing programs that the city has. So as you've heard, Human Services came and talked about the right to counsel and the flexible financial assistance program, which I think we'll continue to hear about. Homelessness prevention and intervention is here to kind of, you know, bring us up to speed on their programs. I think the other thing that I just wanted to highlight, which I think can be challenging in part, like, as Natalie said, like, one type of program is in one division, another type of program is in another division. But really, the topics of focus, as was laid out in GS, are affordable housing production, income assistance, and tenancy preservation. And I think what ties those things together is we're talking about permanent housing, right? And those, it's not like homelessness prevention, right? That has the word homeless in it, but you know, it's less about interim housing, right? And more about making sure that people can remain in permanent homes. So I think like when we were introducing ourselves, right, there's like lots of different topics of interest to us, but I think it is important to kind of keep coming back to what the GS measure said and what the types of programs are that we need to focus on. Anything to add?
With one follow-up on that.
Hang on, David's next.
Oh, wait, before, actually, something just came to mind. Just to your point, Amy, or Vice Chair Amy, just, there might be 3 separate divisions, but I think the Housing and Human Services Department has one goal, and there's a lot of overlaps and participants between the 3 divisions. And I think one thing, I'll at least speak as one of the managers, is, you know, like right to counsel and the FFA, the Flexible Financial Assistance Program. You know, there's such specialties within the 3 divisions that we're able to find a home that fits the best for those. So I wouldn't worry as we're going on this journey together about where it sits necessarily, because we'll find within the 3 divisions where it makes sense in terms of the specialties of how to manage it. So just my little thing to add as well.
Okay, David, you're next then.
Okay. First one, I have a follow-up. You said there's 2 waiting lists. My question about the waiting list is, there's always new construction coming up, and law is, my understanding of it is, for new development, 20%, let's say I build 40 units, 20% of them have to be lower income units. So, what type of dent are we making in these lists? Like, is there a report monthly? We filled X amount of people on this list. We filled X amount of seniors on this list. Is there some sort of monitoring that is happening? I understand the list is closed with 40,000 people. Okay, but are we heading in the right direction, or are we at a stalemate and it's still 40,000 people since last time we checked the list?
So there's 2 wait lists. The one that's closed is the Section 8 Santa Monica housing one,
Okay.
which is for the subsidy. The below market housing wait list is still open, and people are applying to that one regularly. And what you're speaking to is the city's inclusionary program, and we definitely are overseeing that program. Annually, we ask the property owners for their rent rolls, their income qualifications, those other items, to ensure that they are following the agreements that they signed with the city when they were developing that new building. And all of those inclusionary units in the market rate housing do have to use the city's below market housing wait list, which is a requirement to leasing up those residences, which are actively those below market housing wait lists, and staff is ensuring that before they're leasing up, that they are utilizing that wait list.
Okay, but is there like actual report, the trend, like this month we filled
So,
X amount of units, or leased out X amount of units?
I think the reality is, so there's a report of how many units have been created in the city.
Okay.
Since 1994. I've done my own research for the period prior to that. We can do offline, I can show you where the links are to that. But I mean, the practical reality is that we have somewhere between 4,500, it's growing towards 5,000 affordable units in the city, which is, more than 8% of housing stock, which is more than most places, but compared to the number of need, the reality is no. And we will continue to try and mitigate it with what we're doing here, but that list is going to remain very long.
It's not 40,000
So, okay, I'm sorry.
yeah.
So Bruce is next and then Sam.
So just picking up on Amy's point about the focus of GS, where she kind of eloquently showed how all the pieces tie together. At the same time the voters passed GS, they passed another tax, a hotel tax, that raises $5 million a year about. There's another oversight committee for that tax. And I have to report to that committee, and they spend that money on multidisciplinary homeless outlet teams and on interim housing in San Michelle. So they have more flexibility to do things, and they're doing them. And some of that is actually in your division. It's under housing, I don't know which, 3 divisions, but it's, yeah. So it's not like the city isn't addressing those things, but our committee is focused on a narrow area, and then there's another committee that focuses on using that, the hotel tax money, to specifically address some of the concern people have raised here.
I wanted to actually follow up on that as well. I just want to confirm that the interpretation of the funding parameters say that GS funds could not be used, for example, for San Michelle replacement or for interim housing. Is that the new?
I think that's something that's still, I'd be curious, Michael, as, you know, an author of it, you know, what your interpretation is, but that's not something we've looked at yet.
That's something we can discuss at some point, because what exactly do we think the boundaries are here? But it is true that it certainly has to be deed restricted housing, you know, whether that, you could squeeze interim housing into it or not, but I think Amy, certainly as a general principle, and not as a legal interpretation of what's written here, the primary focus of this measure was to prevent homelessness, not to respond to people who are already homeless, not because that isn't important, but because there are other programs that were doing this, and this was meant to deal with that, and to create deed restricted affordable housing. But there also are other, there's that 20%, there could be 20% of what's left over after the administration that has a variety of things, but this is not, I think it is fair to say we can look and decide where the boundaries are, make a recommendation or argue where the boundaries are, but this is not, you're not going to comfortably fit dealing with people who are really already homeless with this measure. This was about, because just to step back for a second, this is a discussion for another time. We have the problem that people are being driven into the streets, so even as we're moving people out, it doesn't solve the problem. So trying to shut off at least the economic portion of the supply of people going into the streets, so that we have, for the people already there, programs, you know, we have county measure H, we have, you know, county measure now. There are a variety of funding sources that are meant to address people who are already experiencing homelessness, to get them, you know, into housing, which have actually been, the study showed, been successful. The problem is that even more people keep going into the streets. So this was focused principally on the shutting off the new supply, as opposed to addressing the folks who are already there, because there were other funding sources for them.
I appreciate the background. It's just helpful. Well, this is a thing that could happen, right? Which is that the San Michelle budget could be significantly higher, and we need to have a conversation about how to fund it. I don't know if that's coming down the line.
Well, and that's one of the things we can talk about when we get to what we want to talk about in the future.
We'll cross that bridge.
No, there's an agenda item in every meeting about what is it we want as a committee to address at the next meeting or upcoming meetings and the like, so we have an opportunity to do that. So I think with that, unless somebody feels strongly, I think we should conclude this agenda item and move on to agenda items.
Oh, I think I You also, yes,
It's 3D.
We're,
Oh, I see.
this is, as I said, there's a lot of paper. Thank you. Are we on 3D?
3D, yeah.
Okay, 3D, which is the presentation by city staff on homelessness prevention and intervention. So, take it away.
Beautiful. Thank you all as we type in this connection. Thank you all. That's I have a lot of gratitude for Natalie and teeing up this conversation. So yes, and very excited to dive in with you all and on not only primarily on the content, the body of work for our homeless prevention and intervention team, or shorthand is HPI. But as the conversation that we just had shows that there's a lot of layers of complexity to the fantastic work that's happening here within the city. So we can dive into that, but I'm going to give note in terms of kind of what is narrow and focused in conversation, and also call in where things kind of are expansive, so that this conversation is not exhaustive, but we can absolutely kind of pin conversations or points of interest for potential future conversations in this space where there's overlay or overlap for the topics that we'll dive into. But more specifically, as we shared at the manager for the homeless prevention and intervention team here at the City of Santa Monica in our Housing and Human Services Division, I'm just a little bit past 2 months having been with this incredible team, and so really excited to talk to you about how we're shaping the work of this portfolio. As Natalie had mentioned, this is a newly created division that has essentially been separated from some previously existing work, and we'll get into that. So to share or review content that we just went over in the handout that you all have is a really helpful tool to help kind of differentiate the divisions. But the Homeless Prevention and Intervention Division was a new team that was created this year that essentially was pulled from our human services work. So this previously existed within our human services division, has now been separated into its own division and exists in parallel with the housing division work that Natalie has been talking about, the human services division, and then us being that third new division under the umbrella of the housing and human services department. I serve as the manager, and as you all previously saw, my position, thankfully and very gratefully, is funded by the Measure GS work, as well as one of our additional senior analysts. There's a total of 6 analysts or senior analysts on our team that focus and help support this work, but primarily in collaboration with city departments, other local service providers, and regional entities, we fund and coordinate the efforts to prevent, mitigate, and reduce homelessness within Santa Monica. So that's kind of the main mission or focus of the body of work that our team helps to support. So, as the name might have given you a nod, the two kind of buckets of work that and intervention. And to be really explicit, when we say prevention, this essentially means helping support folks who are housing unstable from falling into homelessness, and then for intervention are providing services and care for people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness to get connected to supportive services and safe and stable, hopefully permanent housing. This serves as a little bit of an inventory of the different types of activities that happen underneath these two categories, but I want to be really explicit in the fact that this is not exhaustive. One of the things that I have really come to appreciate as I've learned about the portfolio of work and the investments that Santa Monica has made is that there's multiple layers to the service ecosystem that exists within the city, and then the ecosystem that the city exists within the county. So there are a variety of different types of activities that happen within our team that are explicitly and directly funded from initiatives within HPI. There are other activities that we do that are in partnership with other city departments that are also city funded. There are activities that are happening within the service providers where we have operational agreements but are not funding. And then there's just larger services that are happening in the larger ecosystem of Santa Monica for care and support for people who are vulnerable or in need. So there's a lot of different layers of activities and the level of our involvement in these activities, but for today's conversation and for this list for reference, these are primarily going to focus on either funding that's coming directly from the HPI team or collaborations that are happening with other city departments that are city funded. So we could get into the layers in future conversations, but I just want to be really explicit about the fact that, again, what we will be talking about today is not exhaustive. And so also to highlight two really incredible targeted initiatives that are sitting within our division, the Homelessness Strategic Plan, which Natalie teased a little bit. We'll get into some more details there. And then also wanted to do just a gratitude shout out to work that also exists with for the local aging and disability action plan that was recently approved by City Council. There's a couple different commissions where that presentation around that action plan will be done in a more exhaustive way. And we can share that information with you all where you can learn more about it, but just wanted to do an honorable mention because this body of work is also within HPI and has had some really incredible impact. But to specifically dive into our prevention initiatives, we have a couple different areas of focus in terms of demographic or experience that prevention body of work or prevention portfolio focuses on. For this first one, we're going to be talking more specifically to older adults and people with disabilities. And the purpose and focus of that is that we recognize in high cost of living areas, older adults and folks that are living with disabilities have higher likelihood or vulnerabilities to fall into unstable or homelessness housing situations, and that we need to cater services and support specifically to their experiences. So to call out some really long-term, strong partnerships, providers within the community and the work that they're doing. We've had a long relationship with Wise and Healthy Aging, where they provide care management, case management, and flex fund supports with a variety of different service types that you can kind of see underneath their name. Additionally, the Disability Community Resource Center, supporting with the independent living services and home access programming. So it's case management and home modification supports for folks that are aging or have disabilities to be able to navigate within their immediate environment. St. Joseph Center has their older adults health and wellness program, which really focuses on comprehensive case management, mental health services, occupational therapy, and housing navigation. Again, helping people figure out how they stay stabilized in their current environments and then provide long-term care for that type of housing retention. And then Wheels, which is their programming titled Delivering More Than a Meal, which I personally think is quite lovely, where they're providing meal support for folks who are homebound and other types of supportive services that is somewhat a form of in-reach to be connecting with people in their homes, providing a basic need, but also if other needs are identified, being able to do service and resource connection immediately in place. For the other portion of our prevention portfolio really focuses on, again, households preventing falling into homelessness if there's if there's an experience of instability of some type, and then also to single adults. So our comprehensive community legal services has been provided by Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment for a coming expansion. We also have the People Concern that supports us with housing retention programs. So for folks that are in housing, again, thinking about what kind of vulnerabilities are people maybe experiencing, long-term supports that they'll need, and making sure that we keep that housing that oftentimes was either hard to access or was a long journey to access, or just long-term residents and needing that support for any type of stabilization. And then also to our Claire Matrix partnership, which kind of bridges the work between our prevention programming and our intervention programming, where they do homelessness and housed outreach programs for a variety of different types of services, but really focused on treatment care. So folks that are struggling with substance abuse disorders that can benefit from a variety of different types of case management, counseling, treatment options, and then withdrawal management as well. But as was mentioned before, specifically for our prevention portfolio and some of our renters protection expansions, we're going to have T come up and share a little bit more
This is a review for some folks that were with us last month, but again, just some orientation for newer members around the expansion that we have for our renters protection program and some of the work that will be happening as well.
Hello, everyone. I am T, as I shared earlier, and as Allison shared, I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive, maybe not a deep dive, a dive into the renters protection program. And this is in this part of the presentation because it's illustrating that our division, the HPI division, has a large body of work on prevention. And Michael, I really appreciated you kind of elevating the importance of prevention when it comes to slowing down and stopping the inflow into homelessness, which I think is work that I'm very passionate about. And this renters protection program is one really big way that the city is moving towards that. And so, as discussed earlier, also just for context, the HPI division, that is us, we are administering the right to counsel expansion piece of this, and then Human Services is administering the flexible financial assistance. But we're very, very close teams that work very, very closely together, and these programs are very closely tied. So I just want to keep that in mind. And this is a review of what Natalie shared earlier, but this is an opportunity to kind of see it within the scope of HPI's work. City Council approved the Renters Protection Program in March of this year, and the two primary programs coming out of that is the expanded right to counsel services and the flexible financial assistance. I think something we didn't mention earlier is these programs come out of the recommendations of a report that was done by Fetterman Dunn Consulting that the city contracted with to do an analysis on the needs of vulnerable renters in the Santa Monica community. It's a really great report. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do. And these programs came out of those recommendations. And at City Council in March, staff committed to rolling out these programs in 12 to 18 months from that time. So that was about 6 months ago. So we're here today, and both of those programs are in their design and implementation phases. So now I'll just look at each of those programs and kind of talk about the key services within them. So the Right to Counsel program is what it sounds like. It's a program that is designed and intended to ensure that all Santa Monica renters have access to legal services to prevent an eviction and to stay housed, or sometimes that also looks like a soft landing, moving to another residence where they can avoid an eviction. The three key services for this program are, and this is a very crucial one, very foundational, is community outreach. So that will look like the agency providing these services, doing ongoing, multi-pronged outreach in the community in the form of physical and digital materials that are disseminated in multiple languages, as well as in-person events, and door-to-door canvassing are also services that currently in the Right to Counsel program are being utilized and will be a part of the community outreach. We foresee this being very key because, just to be clear, these services we're talking about, Right to Counsel, legal services for tenants, have been offered in the Santa Monica community for a very long time, but this represents a substantial increase in the investment to those services to make sure more people can access them. But that being said, there's a history of maybe people having assumptions about, who these services are for. Maybe not all Santa Monicans think, when they are facing unstable tenancy to utilize these services. So outreach is going to be very important to make sure that these services are utilized, that are funded through Measure GS funds. Key service number 2 is tenant right education. So this you can think about is workshops and clinics in the community that are specifically geared at legal services staff, educating members of the community about their rights as tenants and about right to council services that they can utilize to stay housed. And then finally, the third key service, which is probably the one that everyone thinks of when they think of right to counsel, is the actual legal services. So these are paid staff attorneys providing both full scope legal representation, representing individuals in court, and limited scope legal services for households who might not need that level of representation as well. So those are the key services of the right to counsel expansion. That's a laptop turning off. And as that is being turned on, I again will just emphasize, especially for new members of the commission, that the city has been operating a pilot right to counsel program since 2021 with Legal Foundation of Los Angeles. And so again, this program is called an expansion because it's expanding on these services. Thank you, Allison. You can go ahead and populate all of that. Great. Oops. One. Yeah. So then the other program is the Flexible Financial Assistance Program. So you have the legal services side for people who are facing eviction. The Flexible Financial Assistance Program, the key service here, is really preventative. The idea here is getting financial assistance further upstream to households who maybe they don't have an eviction notice yet, but they know they're headed there because they had a loss of income, or because they had an increase in rent, or any number of situations. We don't currently have a way to get financial assistance to those individuals before an eviction notice. And so that is the goal of these preventative funds that will be offered at one-time, shallow, and deep assistance levels, depending on the need. And this Flexible Financial Assistance Program will also, as its second key service, be providing essentially the settlement money for the cases that the Right to Counsel program is doing. So if you imagine Right to Counsel is working on an eviction case and they need $10,000 in order to absolve the rental arrears, this Flexible Financial Assistance will provide those funds to resolve that UD case and keep that household housed. And then finally, the third key service is within this program, some individuals, some households are going to have needs that are beyond the scope of just like one infusion of financial assistance. Some folks are going to need ongoing case management, and this program includes linking those individuals to such case management. And one thing I'll say before I go here, also just for the new committee members, is where the Right to Counsel expansion is expanding existing programming. The Flexible Financial Assistance, that's a brand new program. So that's something that is not currently being offered at this scale within the city. And so that is something where staff are drafting, actually currently, an RFP to find a provider who would be providing those services. So just making that distinction, that Right to Counsel, we're expanding the existing service, Flexible Financial Assistance, creating a new service, finding a new partner. And then this is just a brief window into kind of maybe where we're at now in terms of implementation. For Right to Counsel, city staff have consulted with other municipalities in the Bay Area, for example, to talk about their Right to Counsel expansion and how they implemented that so that we could get some best practices from them. And we are currently seeking and actually writing the amended and expanded contract that we'll be putting forth to Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. And per the Homelessness Strategic Plan, the goal is to begin that implementation by 2026. And then for Flexible Financial Assistance, as I mentioned earlier, city staff is working on an RFP to go out ideally in early 2026 to identify program partners for that service. So I think that's it. I believe that's it. Yes. Sorry.
I think the RFP is supposed to go out this week.
That's great.
I think that's just want to make note. I think, right?
I
We'll just stick
We're
with
getting an
early
RFP out.
2020s.
No, I mean, but it's, you know, it's a good point, and you probably have the exact timeline. But first on our mind as staff is ensuring that these programs are built up and stood up as quickly as possible. So that is what is guiding us as we move on. Yeah, no, of course. Glad that you provided that. So that is a rundown on the renters protection programs within our portfolio.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Dana. So as we all have heard, and we're going to do a summary because I know that sometimes it's a lot of information to absorb, especially when there's so many layers. But as you have heard, the prevention portfolio that we have is quite comprehensive and very dynamic in terms of not only helping people with basic needs, thinking about direct care services to help with housing retention, but also some of these other nuts and bolts for right to counsel and flexible financial assistance around if someone is at immediate risk of losing their housing, ways that we can quickly intervene. So just summarizing that, the investments that we have in prevention so far within the city are quite holistic. Or intervention services, so these are services that are specifically targeted to people who are actively experiencing unsheltered homelessness, really kind of fall into two major categories, and that's going to be homeless outreach and different types of emergency and interim shelter or care. So for outreach, we have a lot of different types of collaborations that are happening, but the one most concretely to highlight in terms of the initiative directly coming from the HPI division are 6 outreach teams that we have that work across the city to connect with folks who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and being able to get them connected to immediate care. These teams have a variety of different folks immediately in the field on site, and then have the ability to connect to care long-term based on need. And also too, folks may notice outreach workers that are funded through our initiatives are decked out in these jazzy blue vests that you can see them working in the community in the field, pounding the pavement in these nice little uniforms, which is super fun. So additionally to this, there's a variety of other types of programs or outreach focused services that we have where we're collaborating with PD or other types of emergency or first responders, which we're happy to get into that. But that's most importantly transitioning us into our biggest interim housing project that we're funding within the city, which is San Michelle. So this is his 60-bed congregate shelter, primarily or exclusively for single adults. We have targeted pathways for referral into the shelter for first responders, and then also to our community of providers have the ability to refer it into the shelter based on eligibility. There's a variety of other types of interim housing or emergency style shelter services that we can provide. There's in terms of partnerships with other city departments or providers that operate within the service ecosystem of Santa Monica, but our largest investments through the intervention side of our work is really through our outreach and engagement activities, and then the work that we're doing in San Michelle and other types of bridge housing supports. And just to kind of, I'm sorry about the weird block in the middle there. And also just to really highlight what's already been spoken to quite exhaustively already in our conversation is that the HPI team works really closely with the housing division to help identify referrals, get eligible households in application and connected to permanent housing opportunities that come through our housing division. There's a lot of collaboration, obviously, that not only happens with the housing division here at the city, but our community of providers that are also engaging with clients and households on the ground to be able to make these service connections. And then lastly, to round us out, wanted to draw some specific attention and education for folks on our homeless strategic plan. Next slide. Thank you. So just a little history, background, and framing. Back in 22, the city partnered with a consultant, Moss Adams, that essentially conducted a study that recommended that the city develop a comprehensive homeless strategic plan that builds on 4-pillar framework, which we'll talk about here in a moment, and that sets clear policy direction, promotes alignment across city stakeholders, and supports regional efforts. So that essentially pushed us into 2023 when the city chose to work with the consultant Barry Dunn to develop a homeless strategic plan for the city in partnership with city In 24, that collaboration that was created by Barry Dunn birthed the Homeless Strategic Plan Project Team, and this group of interdepartmental staff created a plan and presented that draft to community stakeholders, boards, commission, nonprofit partners, as well as HSGP grantees for feedback. And then in 2025, the Homeless Strategic Plan Project Team presented to City Council on March 11th, and the plan was adopted. It's going to be a 5-year plan, and we're going to be reporting on our activities quarterly, and the plan officially started July 1. So one of the things that I think is really important is first just to name, like, this is our first formal presentation as a division to a community stakeholders. And we're at a really interesting evolution point in the sense that we've created a new division that was pulled off from a larger body of work that the city was shepherding to create a targeted team to be very concretely focused and intentional about this body of work, and how we will continue to evolve and manage and steward that body of work will very much be in the vision and in alignment of what the strategic plan for addressing homelessness within the city has tasked us to do. So our efforts in terms of how we're hoping to move forward is really being thoughtful and intentional about where our investments currently lie and where gaps exist, and working our best to be able to address and respond to the directives that are given to us in the strategic plan to be as efficient and productive as possible with the resources that we have, knowing that our primary goal universally across these two kind of focused bodies of work, prevention and intervention, is about keeping people in their housing or connecting people back to safe and stable housing as quickly and efficiently as possible, making sure that the resources that we have invested are organized and aligned to be able to do that, and that as we continue that work that we're engaged and responsive to the community experience to make sure that how we're catering those services or engaging in our collaborations is actually responsive to the need that's being experienced. So we look forward to future presentations where we're able to actually frame the entirety of our body within the initiatives within the strategic plan, and the impacts that we're seeing that is being made within the community. Next slide. Okay, perfect. Just to also note, if folks are not familiarized with the strategic plan, I highly encourage folks to take the time to look at it. The team did incredible work to be able to pull it together. Very thoughtful and collaborative in the way that the entire city is going to be engaged and supportive in the initiatives that are drawn out there. But the pillars are really focused again on prevention, intervention, how are we coordinating and communicating about the work that we're doing. And last slide, or soon to last slide, we're rounding it out. We have homeless resource guide cards for folks if you don't feel well educated or would like to have better awareness about the services that are provided within our city and the amazing providers that we partner to be able to provide care to folks. So T will be sure to pass those out to everybody.
I will do that.
We also want to encourage, because on this next slide, we have essentially just a little bit of an index here to help people understand how our team is organized and who is dedicated, or seeing that staff are specifically dedicated to particular activities, just so transparency and understanding who we have and who they're working on. But we want to be really deliberate about saying that if there's a desire to be able to connect somebody to care that you're interacting with in the community, to please use the resource guides first that we're providing you, because that's going to provide a direct and immediate connection versus thinking that these folks will be able to be resource navigators. That's essentially just going to potentially cause delays in care and create a middleman, as opposed to being able to just connect people immediately to services. So just want to be really deliberate about that. That resource card is going to be your first step if you're looking to connect people to care. If you experience bottlenecks or you hear about struggles or things that you may have concerns about as a result of that, these then are going to be your people to help run interference and maybe get better education or help problem solve a complex issue that you may be running up against beyond that immediate care connection. And then this is our contact information in case you want to engage with us more, but obviously you have a direct pipeline to myself. Also T's information is on the previous slide, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, let's just see first who wants to speak. Oh, even better. Others? Put me on the list.
Yes,
For the intervention you were talking about, you had the Samo Bridge up there. I don't know if that pertains to us, or would any of our funding go to any of these intervention things? Or is this just something overall that we're seeing?
Mostly it's probably things that it's for us to know about, but ask your questions.
I'd love to see reports on what they're doing, because
On Samo Bridge.
On Samo Bridge, because I'm seeing that people are being threatened with citations for digging through public garbage cans and having their fingerprints taken. And I mean, if this is one of the things that they're using to get the homeless people into this Samo Bridge, and say you can either go through some program in another city, or you'll be sent to jail or whatever. So I'd love to see whatever reports we can find on what they're doing with the.
Absolutely. I know that the CAO recently gave a presentation internally about performance metrics, but I can also, Thomas, we can maybe follow up with the CAO team to see what information is available that they're publishing publicly about the performance of Samo Bridge. I know that they are tracking that very closely.
And
What is Samo Bridge?
Samo Bridge.
Oh, yes. So Samo Bridge is essentially a 2-trailer operation of the courthouse, which essentially is a diversion program, to say that if folks are maybe encountering law enforcement, and I'm not
It's
sure.
run by the law enforcement.
It's,
Or
or technically,
yeah, it's a program that's administered by the city attorney's office.
yes.
But they use
Yeah.
officers.
First
Police
responders are the primary referrals.
They use
and-
officers with
yes.
guns, right?
Correct, they use law enforcement,
Okay.
yes.
So they use officers to bring these people in and give them a choice between some program or some other program, and getting them off the street forcefully. And I'd love to hear more about what's going on with that.
I believe that's not being used by Measure GS funding, but I believe the city attorney's office is here, because I believe they received funding from the state.
Yes, yeah, state-funded program administered by the city attorney's office, in partnership with first responders, to divert folks into services as opposed to, having them criminalized.
As
So,
opposed to giving them citations for
yeah,
digging through the
yeah,
garbage.
exactly, yeah, and it started this year, so I think it'd be a great thing, to figure out what reporting is looking like for that, so that, you can have that information.
Thank you. The other would be, you talked about San Michelle, the shelter there.
Yes.
I would love it if we could have a subcommittee that could go see what shelters, how many beds, and see the quality of these shelters, if we're going to be putting any money into these. And I don't understand why People Concerned always has people sitting on the sidewalk there. They have no place better to let people wait while they're waiting for services. I don't understand this. But I would love it if we could have a subcommittee look into that as well.
We can talk about that. We can get to that part of the agenda.
Very good.
Okay, I guess I'm next. So this kind of raises, I'll jump to one of my questions. So what committees, boards, whatever, actually have within their jurisdiction the intervention part of what you do?
In terms of the funding source,
Well, just who do you, so there used to be something called the Social Services
Yes.
Commission. I don't know if it still exists.
Yes.
In those days, all of the went to them, and that was the Border Commission that sort of looked at all of that. So I'm wondering today who that is, because, as Wade says, except to the extent it's something we're gonna put funds into, it's not really our jurisdiction. It's important to understand what's going on, because we're a big piece of the overall program, but there are already boards and commissions to which is reporting this may be something that, for example, we want to talk to the people, see what reports they're getting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer to.
Sure, yeah, so, great point. So the Human Services Commission now is the previously Social Services Commission, I think, just to line up with the terminology that the city uses for the department. So yeah, there's a Human Services Commission, which would be really in a lot of ways, yeah, overseeing like a broader portfolio of really all of the human services grant portfolio programs that we have, including San Michelle is one of them, as well as, you know, everything ranging from child care subsidies, everything that we fund with HSGP is subject matter for the Human Services Commission, which I actually believe meets this Wednesday.
Yes,
Yes.
this Wednesday at 3 o'clock.
There you go.
In this room.
Yeah. But I think they meet
Yes.
quarterly meetings.
Quarterly meetings?
Yes, correct.
But they meet
So-
this Wednesday.
And their agendas are on the city website.
I believe it's been posted already,
Yeah,
right?
it's been posted. The city attorney's office regularly updates that commission at every meeting. So, that's a good one to participate in and come to if you want answers directly from the city attorney's office regarding, those programs. They're on the agenda every meeting.
Yeah, I think our presentation was giving you a broad perspective, right, on the services provided by the city. And I think that commission's maybe like best suited, you know, for following up on a lot of that, where obviously this commission is pretty narrow and focused. But we wanted to give you context.
I'll put you on the list, Sam. I have about 4 more questions before we get to. So then, I was trying to understand the division between putting the Right to Counsel program under the Homelessness Prevention and Intervention Division and the Flexible Finance under the Human Services Division. So I understand there's some of the money from the flexible finance that's supposed to be for interventions before we get to eviction, which is clearly the best place for that to happen. There's actual studies that have shown that merely getting an eviction notice, even if you're not evicted, is associated with an increase in mortality. Eviction is very large increase in mortality associated with that. But there are also a lot of legal reasons why it's easier to solve the problem before the eviction is started. But see, what is the reason for dividing those two things, which seem to be they're supposed to work together?
Yeah, so the primary focus, I think, for the Right to Counsel expansion, obviously, is a program activity that very clearly lives in our prevention portfolio for HPI, so that's an expansion of an existing activity. Obviously, there's a lot of dynamicness to the way that that's expanding, that T overview, but just to say that's where it currently lives and expanding it within its current portfolio. For the flexible financial assistance, correct me if I'm wrong, T or Natalie, but the idea is that they're wanting to be able to have, it's not that service opportunity is not just targeted towards individuals, that wanted to have a bit more of a comprehensive understanding for different demographics that would need to be able to have a service provider that understands how to be able to provide care and support not only for single individual households, but family households and then households with minor children. So wanting to have a specific attunement to what that care and service provision would look like, and that the current flexible fund that we have now has historically been overseen by the Human Services Division as a part of the HSGP portfolio. So the knowledge of the management of that particular funding activity, and then also too for the more expanded demographic focus, is one of the rationales for why FFA would live in the Human Services Division.
And I'll also add to the Human Services Division, also oversaw the 2 COVID programs, the RCAR and the ERAP, thank you, as well. So they have the technical knowledge to not only do the RFP, but also to execute the program once it
Could I ask a specific follow-up question, because not only it was.
Sure, go ahead.
My understanding is that the legal aid services in the past have been administered through the HSGP as well. So I guess I'm curious, has that moved to HPI since HPI was created?
Yeah, I can speak to it a bit. bit. So, I guess a few things to tease out there. So the HSGP portfolio, while the majority of its contracts are under the Human Services Division, the HBI team also oversees the HSGP contracts that fall under homelessness services. So there's so many acronyms, H's, but I think the HSGP portfolio, it really is like a co-project in a lot of ways for both of our divisions. So I think that's like one distinction. The other piece is, so WAFLA does have, Legal Aid Foundation has an HSGP contract with the city and has for many years providing legal services beyond just eviction prevention. So also family law and domestic violence cases and benefits enrollment cases. So that contract has existed and continues to exist. In 2021, the Right to Counsel pilot, which started in the city attorney's office, was created as an additional contract with the cities to specifically focus on eviction prevention services. So it was basically an acknowledgement that we need more of these services and we need its own program for it. So our division currently holds 2 contracts with WAFLA. One that is HSGP, that's broader for the community, and then one that's Right to Counsel, that's focused on eviction prevention.
And then I'll come back to your other questions, but, so then, just because I think we covered this in the not official meeting,
Yes.
in the official meeting, in addition to just educating people, ultimately the plan for the Right to Counsel program also expands the economic higher income people than used to be qualified will now qualify for eviction assistance. Is that right?
So
Are we going up to moderate this? Neither the original, whatever acronym you use, I know, we've been paying LAFLA money to have housing attorneys for at least 12 years that I've been involved in the city. Then you're saying limited because only low-income people could qualify, and the measure permits it to go up to moderate. Is that our long-term plan?
yeah, correct. So yeah, per the measures language, 80% AMI moderate income is kind of the upward ceiling of individuals that would qualify.
It's 100 is clear.
Oh, you're right. Thank you so much for that joint correction. But yes, affirming what you're saying about moderate, being like the new ceiling essentially, which in theory then, creates additional demand that we'll need to expand the services for. And we didn't get into the specifics of it, but currently the Right to Counsel pilot has 2 staff attorneys. This initial funding has the funding to go all the way up to 5 additional attorneys, which is quite a big expansion.
Okay. I just want, trust me, I'm all on board. We need to start with the people
Yes.
at the bottom, but, it's a real problem for renters. Even if you're, at median income and whatever, there just isn't a whole lot of actual legal services available for the tenant side, period. And when you do have to pay for it, it's expensive relative to that. So that when we're talking about why there needs to be outreach, there's a whole portion of the community that has never had the possibility of getting assistance, which we would provide.
Yeah, they might not think of LAFLA as for them.
Yes, if they, in fact, almost certainly
Yeah.
would not think that. Okay, the next question I have is this. So, at the informal meeting, I think Wade and Bruce in particular spoke to, feeling the urgency that we get these things rolled out. And I know Sam sent an email about the same thing. And, after that meeting, I was thinking about their comments and felt that they're absolutely right about that. I guess I have this question. If I understood what you're saying, is the GS fund is contributing close to $500,000 for staffing. That's what you had in your.
Oh,
Oh, and Mike, yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, like staffing for.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about that.
Well, so it sounds like it's funding your position. Is that
Funding my
right?
position as well as
And
another
that's
senior
an
analyst.
analyst, so, but the only GS programs that exist, or are trying to exist, are, right to counsel and the flexible financing, there is nothing else. So the administrative money as set forth in the statute says, no more than 6% of the funds deposited in the homelessness prevention and affordable housing fund annually may be used for compliance, implementation, administration, including but not limited to enforcement of the city's local system of priorities among potentially eligible recipients and support for the resident oversight committee. So, at least as I understand what we're doing here, is we're funding administration, compliance, implementation of GS programs. So with two basically full-time people being funded by GS, can't we get those RFPs out faster to do this? And in addition to having the lawyers, if we don't have the money for them to use to do that, they're not, for however, another 6 months, they're not going to be nearly as effective as they would be with it. So, and I was someone who is focused on some other things, but listening to my colleagues here, I think they bring a very important and persuasive case. And one of the things the money is used for is to allow us to stand up to these programs. So if we don't have enough current staff to do it, it seems like the GS money should be funding people who are working full-time to get the only GS programs that we have out there that we're funding instead of. So anyway, that's comment for reaction.
For sure. No, I really appreciate that reflection, and I'm 100% attuned and on point. I can tell you that from my conversations with Heather, our director, and also too for team members that are directly involved in this, the sense of urgency is quite high. And so there's a lot of alignment across our department, as well as my understanding within the CMO as well, that once we have the documents ready for essentially processing through our procurement department, they are aware of what we're getting ready to bid out, and the final details in terms of what does it mean for our department to fully kind of release that and push it into procurement for them to proceed with the process. That that linkage has been made. But ultimately, I say all of that to say that the collaborative of city departments and or respective staff are well aware of how high priority these two respective initiatives are, and that we will expedite them to the best of our ability. My hope is that as we get into the rest of this month for further details of what that procurement process timeline looks like, happy to be able to provide that information to Natalie to report back to you all and maintain accountability and that progressive timeline until we find an appropriate provider for the FFA side, and then also to have a timeline for what the implementation of expansion looks like with WAFA.
And then the last thing, since we are talking about it, even though it may or may not end up being something we contribute any money to, but one of the things, there's a gentleman who is living on the streets near my neighborhood who I've gotten to know quite well. We've encouraged him and finally got to the point of interacting with the city and making some progress. But something that should probably have been obvious to me before talking to him, but it wasn't, is that there is a portion of our unhoused population, just as quite frankly, there's a portion of our housed population that has mental challenges of various kinds. And it's just as scary it doesn't matter whether you have a home or don't have a home, to whether it's scary to have to be in close proximity to those folks. So one of the critical things, it seems like, that we're appropriately to make sure is true in our shelters, and B, is important to making people feel comfortable coming off the streets and into our shelters, is making sure that they are truly safe within those, and you hear people, whether it's true or not, very nervous that it's not safe for them to go into those shelters. So how are we addressing that issue?
Sure, no, I really appreciate that. One of the things that I was most interested in as I joined the city team and began working on my education of the activities that have happened historically and also happening actively presently. You know, my background is I've been in homeless services for almost around 20 years. And so I've worked with faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and a joint powers authority. So have the perspective of like grassroots activism, a little bit more of a kind of traditional 501c3 that does like full wraparound care and full spectrum services for all populations for homelessness and housing, and then also too from a governmental perspective. And so one of my biggest personal drivers right now is understanding what is happening in the larger county landscape and the way that we have control kind of over our own jurisdiction, but we can't protect ourselves from the impacts of what's happening around us and the influence that that has directly in the city. So knowing that there are larger forces that we can't control, some more immediate forces that we can, do we have a comprehensive understanding of what honestly the mini continuum that Santa Monica has invested in and made? Some of it, as I talked about before, at the top of our share that we've directly invested in, and others are a result of collaborations, and other things are just what has popped up within the ecosystem of service within the city. And so our obligation in this work is to work ourselves out of a job. What does it mean to make homelessness as rare, brief, and non-reoccurring as possible is our ultimate and focus and goal. But we have to make sure that the way that our services are designed actually lead to that point. So looking at where our investments are and what does that mean from a service experience has been one of my key goals. And so the city has a lot to be proud of in terms of, like we talked about before, its investments in prevention, because as you said, what local data has shown us over the last 10 years is that we can't house people as fast as they fall into homelessness. We've had some great strides in terms of being able to house people, but people are falling into homelessness faster than we can house people who have been unstable for longer periods of time. All of that to say, having an attuned eye to the way that people are engaged off of their experience on the streets into some kind of safe and stable emergency or interim housing, and then what that engagement looks like of that individual to get them connected to some kind of safe, stable, and ultimately permanent housing resource, and the wraparound care that's required for their unique experience is something that we should be able to have visibility on and or be able to monitor controls for what that pathway looks like. And so one piece of those controls, oftentimes you'll hear the metaphor of a thermostat be used, that if one thing is if you have this whole pathway and there's multiple components of this system or this pathway, if the pressure on one particular component gets intensified, then you need to be able to adjust the thermostat of your system to put increased support or pull off pressure to essentially stabilize your resource to the best of your ability, knowing that we never have as much resources as what we have need. But monitoring programs and the kind of care that's happening within programs, how people are getting connected to services, how long they're staying in services, how they're exiting, is a key point of that thermostat function. And so one of the things that I'm working on with the team, that I'm working on with Heather, is about, do we have a comprehensive understanding of what our service system pathway looks like and the ways that we're controlling the thermostat? And so that piece that you're raising is 100% a part of it's a part of our contract monitoring, it's a part of the technical assistance that we provide with our providers, and being able to provide that feedback and support and make adjustments where we can to improve care or correct operational challenges, struggles.
Last thing, then I'll turn. But just on that, the other, do we still have this homeless registry of people who, are considered Santa Monicans who are homeless? There used to be, I know you're recent here, but there used to be something that under certain conditions, if you've been here a certain amount of well, either if your last house situation was in Santa Monica or you had been here for a certain period of time. We still have that, and I guess the thing that's related to that is I did read your public comment Wade, and I reflected on my experience with this other gentleman and a similar kind of thing of whether people who have been here for a while, whether there's really documentation of that and how we make sure that we actually know that people are here, if that's still a relevant criteria. That's something it sounds like, based on the way Wade's describing his circuit and his stance, and I can tell you the way this gentleman explained his
new system on or something.
Absolutely. Tia, I may have to defer to you for more specifics about a specific SOP
Yeah.
list. What I can tell you is that we do, for our outreach services, they have essentially care or client rosters for who they're providing care coordination for, that we like interface with them as a collective, but also have one-on-one TA calls with them about how that is going. Like folks that they are providing care with have particular high needs, need special types of service connections. I also know that there's a high utilizers list that we manage in partnership with first responders or other city departments that interface with folks around children in the community to make sure that we're providing care or trying to expedite resources for people who have higher acuity needs. And then there's a variety of different shared projects that we have in partnership with the housing division to make sure that for common types of resources that we know the city has, that we have an active running and actively managed list of clients who are eligible for those resources that we can plug them into as soon as an opportunity becomes available. But anything more specific?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit. So yes, what you're referring to is Santa Monica Priority Populator, Santa Monica Program Participant. We changed the acronym, but SMPP is essentially this criteria that helps us and our providers in the city differentiate who are the folks who have the longest, strongest tie to the Santa Monica community, and how do we make sure that our city resources are prioritized to those individuals. And this is a criteria that is developed in the context of the fact that we're, in a crisis within a crisis, right? Like we have a homelessness crisis in Santa Monica, we have a homelessness crisis in Los Angeles County, and one across the state. And Santa Monica is one municipality in the midst of that. And so this criteria, which is essentially for our purposes, individuals whose last permanent address was in Santa Monica, that means your SMPP, or if you have a documented history of 3 years of homelessness experienced in Santa Monica. There's more fine-tuned, but those are the basic criteria. And that criteria is important because it allows us to ensure our resources are used for the folks who have the ties to the community. But it's also a big challenge in terms of how do we get that documentation, for someone who has been experiencing homelessness, where by definition, you don't have a place to store documents, or you're transient where you're living. So we workshop a lot of solutions for that with our providers. Contacts with first responders is a big way that we try to, use that data to kind of verify where folks have been. We also take letters, by various providers to show that. But it's a challenge. We were totally, acknowledge that. But we also are trying to utilize the dollars, in the most responsible way. So there's a tension there for sure. But that's the criteria, and it does still exist. Yeah.
Sam, you're next in line.
I wanted to ask about sort of reporting and metrics, just sort of generally speaking, particularly with an interest in the Right to Counsel program, but just more broadly. Can you tell me a little bit about how HPI and Housing in General reports to, what metrics are you tracking? Are they reported to council, or are they reported publicly on a regular basis? I'm curious in the context of the discussion we had about the below market rate housing wait list, for example, or the Right to Counsel program.
Absolutely. Tia, I'll take the front end, you want to take the right to counsel.
Yeah.
So for, I think probably the best kind of umbrella data set of KPIs that you can look at that are reflective of what the HPI team is doing in our body of work is going to be through that homelessness strategic plan. You'll see there lots of very key performance indicators across the goals that plan has, and it's we are accountable to reporting on those metrics on a quarterly basis. And so my understanding in terms of process though is that gets culminated into an annual report that we are required to go back to City Council and report on. In addition to essentially that strategic plan and body of KPIs and the collaborative work that's happening with those, all of our HSGP grantees within the contracts that we have with them, that portion of that funding
pool that sits with HPI for our targeted activities. All of those contracts have very catered KPIs that are written for their performance metrics, and they report on them on a biannual basis.
I'm sorry, KPI?
A key performance indicator, yeah,
So
an outcome metric.
the quarterly indicators are reported publicly, are they available to the public or only?
To my understanding, they get culminated into the annual report, but I could be corrected on that for HSP.
Yes,
Oh.
so for HSGP, all of the agencies have year-end reporting that they do.
That's the grant program.
Yeah, that's the grant
There is
program. I know, there's all the H's in this.
I just
And
recently
every
jumped this
business
hurdle,
has
so it will come soon.
But HSGP is, the broad grants program across the community provided services. Those programs all do reporting, have year-end reporting on their program outcomes that is released publicly. So you can go right now online, Human Services, City of Santa Monica, look at year-end reporting for HSGP grants. The homeless strategic plan, which I feel like our team member O'Shea is like the best at speaking to, but I can speak to my level of knowledge, which is that they're quarterly, and I think the thing to show here is the homeless strategic plan was just approved in March of this year. So like that process has yet to happen yet, so we're speaking forward. But yes, quarterly metrics that will be reported ultimately in a public dashboard is the goal for that. And then there's also an annual report on homelessness that our division does to City Council that kind of summarizes it in an annual way. So,
And I believe that's in March.
yes,
That's nice.
yes, it's in March, yeah, that's why, yeah, coincided with the strategic plan. Yeah.
And the.
Oh, and I can speak to right to counsel.
Yeah,
Is that where you
okay.
want? Yeah. So, those are kind of some broad reporting sources, like to kind of get a little bit more technical. So for example, with the current right to counsel program, that program reports quarterly. And some of the data that we focus on for them on a quarterly basis are one, the number of households that they have served with legal services, also the number of full scope cases that they have taken with Santa Monica households. Also an important part of these programs is case management services. So these are the case managers who really do a lot of the initial groundwork to like build up the case that then goes to court, and they're the front, almost like they're like the front door for a lot of these clients. We also track those services, so how many folks are receiving case management. In terms of like outcomes, we're also tracking the number of households who, as a result of their representation, stay in their home. Also the number of households who negotiate a soft landing where they avoid an eviction, but they move, somewhere else in the community. And then we also track the amount of financial assistance dollars that go to each of those cases to resolve cases. So, and then probably the last one I would name is we also track the community outreach activities. So how many workshops are being done in the community? How many canvassing, how many communities do we reach? Those kind of things. Yeah.
So I think that question about the financial assistance is the other one, and I think Mike mentioned, but I reached out to our city manager about this as well. But it would be very helpful to understand what the existing financial assistance programs are and how they differ from the preventative financial assistance program, because I did read the Fetterman Dunn report, and it seems that it's actually just not totally clear what exact forms of financial assistance are delivered through the HSGP participants today. Like, it mentioned St. Joseph specifically, but yeah.
We actually gave difference to that at the last informal meeting, so if we can do like a quick summary. I can't recall.
Is the recording available of the one?
I think the
I
recording,
saw it
if we can
wasn't
do a quick
online,
summary. I think the key difference is the HSGP, and I'll let you speak. The HSGP Flex Fund, Human Services Flex Fund, is specifically only for participants that are already in HSGP, a grants program. They're already in that program in some fashion, while the FFA program is open, will be open to any Santa Monican currently. And
The HSGP is state funded or?
So Human Services Grants Program, that's essentially a program and a funding source that comes directly from the city.
From the state?
From the city.
City.
Yes, from us.
But they already have a case manager from one of those
That's
organizations.
correct. Already enrolled in
St. Joseph or,
Yeah. Whatever.
There's an existing relationship already.
But the uses of those funds, for example, like let's say, I think I'm gonna be short on November rent. I show up as, I'm not a St. Joseph participant, but I show up as St. Joseph and say, hey, I need your services, but also I need November rent. Like, these funds can be used for that purpose through existing grant programs. Is that
So for
correct?
T for the flex fund, our existing flex funds, the most common usages for those dollars are for like security deposits. If to say that there's like rental arrears, but a plan for stabilization that would not require longer term care. Or oftentimes other common requests that we get are like decluttering to support housing retention support. Tends to be the most common usage of, I feel like there's one more thing, there's like 4 categories in it, I'm not remembering the other one. But essentially move-in assistance, so first month's rent, security deposit, arrears, decluttering, or retention-based services tend to be the most common types of use categories for our existing flex funds. The FFA, or the Flexible Financial Assistance, essentially will operate as kind of traditional homeless prevention funding, where you can get a shallow amount of service for a long period, a shallow amount of rental subsidy support for a long period of time, or a deep one for a shorter period of time that essentially helps you stabilize in place. Just checking for corrections. Yeah, so that's essentially, those are the primary differences of the flex fund versus the flexible financial assistance.
And if it's not clear to anybody here, hoarding can be a ground for being evicted. So decluttering is to prevent that from being a ground in which somebody could lose their home.
So, yeah, the context of this is that I would just be interested in whether, because I think Fetterman done report said that St. Joseph had exhausted the availability of FFA to them, that the, like, rental arrears sounds like a very good use of financial assistance, or all of those actually sound like good uses, so I'd be curious if the FFA program is going to require another, 12 months to get started, whether it's worth considering funding other mechanisms of FFA basically in the meantime.
Yeah. I mean, I think in brief, I feel very aligned with you, and I think that's something, I know it's 8 o'clock and we can turn in a lot of things, but, that there are other prevention resources and funding kind of in the landscape, and we're actively working as a division to kind of, play the chess game of like, when are these programs going to come online, and what can we do for that, like more immediately to address these needs. So, yeah, very aligned, and there are opportunities there.
And yeah, just echoing what T has said, is that we're working to be very strategic and targeted with every resource that we have to be able to build bridge supports as we're working on implementation. And just the fact that we want to be efficient and quick, but also well intentional about how FFA essentially is procured out, because the level of funding and how quickly that can move requires a very unique capacity for a very unique provider, and we want to make sure to make a smart choice and structure that vetting as targeted as possible to prevent delays or potential barriers or operational breakdowns in the future because of a lack of maybe intentionality or focus at the start. So that's really where
if you sense any kind of delay from us, it's more of from the place of how do we make sure that we're designing this procurement as targeted and focused as possible. We know what the barriers are for this kind of service and what the roadblocks are. We know the kind of provider that we need. Excuse me. We make sure that this procurement is written very specifically to make sure that we're getting the exact type, correct style provider who knows what they're in for and can launch and implement.
Yeah, I wanted to just touch on this comment about urgency, because I think that we are all very aligned in that this is an urgent issue. And I think anyone that works or loves a person that is in this situation understands how urgent these things are. And we could be here nonstop, not sleeping 24 hours straight doing this, and you guys spend your whole day, every day solving these things. So thank you for coming, and I'm hoping we can have you back when we get to more nitty-gritty parts of this stuff, and I trust you guys are experts in what you're doing. We appreciate the effort you guys put into making sure that these programs we roll out work, because this is the beginning of this money, and if we screw it up now, no one's gonna want us to do this again. So I really value the level of consideration you guys are putting into making sure these are effective programs, because people are really fickle, and like helping people in crisis is really messy. And this, you can have the bed and you can be on the phone and you can have them go out for a cigarette and never come back. And that's just what working with someone in this environment is like. So the programs need to be as strong as possible, so that when these people are fully like ready and in a place to accept the help and get the help, it's there for them. And so, yeah, thank you. Hopefully we can have them back if we figure out more what's going on.
I'm sure we'll.
Yeah, well, the line be regular, yes.
Yeah. Great, well, I think that does complete the agenda. Oh, sorry, go ahead first.
I just want to underscore that I think there's going to be an explosion if you don't get the RFP out like yesterday.
Yes.
And you can tell everyone that you work with, you came to this committee and were all angry at the city, not at you personally, you weren't here. But this guy went out and got signatures in 2022 to put the thing on the ballot. And he organized people. And the voters passed it, and that anniversary is a month from now. And the city hasn't done anything with the money to help people, not anything. And so Oliver says he wants to sit down and meet with us. That's what he said to Sam. That's what I'm gonna tell him. It's not your fault, it's not Oliver's fault, but there are hundreds of people in this community that worked on this measure 3 years ago, and nothing has happened. Not $1 has gone to help a person. And so it's not right to say, oh, we're working on the RFP. Again, not your fault, you've been here 2 months. But whoever's fault it is, whether it's the council or the former city manager or the former whatever, or Heather or whoever, it can't go on this way. It can't go on and say, oh, we're working on it. So I think the anniversary of the passage is the huge day that's 1 month from today. And it would be really good if you said to the people you work with, I went to this meeting, they're not happy that it hasn't happened, and that if we can get it out before the month anniversary, that would be a good thing. And I think if it comes to March 1 and things aren't happening, then this committee is probably gonna do something to the council and say that this is not good, that the money needs to be spent to help people. And we're not so concerned that, oh my God, we might give $100 to the wrong person, is an excuse to say, well, we haven't given anything to anybody, and you have millions and millions of dollars sitting in the account.
Please
it's not about you, it's about telling, you can tell whoever you report to, they're mad, and it's not gonna be pretty.
No, we receive that with great enthusiasm.
Yeah, well, we can be here to help you when you have idiots that you have to deal with who says, oh, it's gotta go through 7 other layers of review. It can't, and look, we're gonna respond to Oliver, we're gonna meet with him, we're gonna tell him the same thing. So when he calls you, you'll be ready.
Yes. Thank you.
And Bruce, maybe you're saying this, but I guess, right, like Oliver was supposed to be here today, we could all reach out and say, sorry you weren't able to make it, and here is a major concern that was expressed by all committee members.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Some animals.
Oliver, that's the city man?
Yep.
City man. Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I get an email from him, I was just asking, okay, oh, sorry.
Oliver Chi, you said Chi?
Yeah. Yeah, I get, he emails every week, and none of these KPIs you guys were talking about are, on there for the homelessness.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I think Sam wanted the last word.
Yeah, I was just listening to, it's sort of like also a back and forth, like we're here to help you too, that if you want to go and say like, hey, we need council authority to change the way that money is spent in some way, right? Like, we're happy to support you in doing that and go to our council and say like, hey, this needs to happen, and it needs to happen right now, like,
No, really appreciate that very much, and like your voices absolutely ring in our heads daily, and look forward to being able to give you all feedback by year, or if not before, by the next meeting about the progress that we do.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We got it in the last consulting meeting as well, so. Okay. Okay, we're now on item 5A, which is the August 4th, 2025 minutes. Is there any corrections to the draft minutes by anybody?
Move to approve the minutes.
Awesome.
Okay, any discussion? Not all in favor? Okay, anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Okay, one abstention. Mark? Okay, so that passes. Now we're on to item 6, which is public input on remaining agenda items. There's no public. We'll now move on to item 9, staff administrative items, status update on the city housing trust fund and Measure GS fund.
There's no report out. This was just in, can't recall, I believe it was the August meeting. I was let the committee know that there's a big info item on the status of the city's housing trust fund, so I've, Thomas has done a great job of just providing the hyperlink for that, as well as also a hard copy in your packet as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, is there anybody else other than me?
And I did a brief summary.
Hang on, I just want to write down the list so we can go in order. So Bruce, Amy, Bruce, anybody else right now? No, okay. Amy?
I am just curious about the priorities, the funding priorities. Were those set by council or how?
For the over-the-counter application process?
Yeah. that you
So, those are part of the Housing Trust Fund guidelines. So, the first one, it has to meet the guidelines that were approved. And then the, number 2 is, one was not set by council, it might have been set by council, but then, the cost per apartment per bedroom, that's been, a long-standing part of the review process. And then development, including the residents for special needs populations, seniors, and larger households is also in the housing trust fund, as well as leveraging city funding with other housing. Oh, yes.
Sorry, it's the prioritization that's on the 4th page where it says housing trust fund spending prioritization, sorry. Where it says the first one is prioritizing money for city-owned sites, and the pod program.
Oh, those, yes. So those, these were past prioritizations. So, city-owned sites, which we're going through now, that was a policy consideration that was set. The pod program, council has established previously it was $2 million, and then this last fiscal year was increased up to $3 million for that. The pod program is the Preserving Biodiversity program. And then the $47.2 million, that was a council direction that's been done starting in 2021. So that was withholding specifically Measure GS funds, to cover the general funds. But it's
Just
starting.
to be clear,
with-
we're talking about 2016
Sorry.
measure GS.
GS, yes, correct, GSH funds, apologies. GSH, not GS funds. And this fiscal year, 25-26, council authorized future or current funds for GSH to start flowing back into the housing trust funds, as well as also repayments, starting the repayment of those as well. And I believe I can find the exact, but there was a policy that was set by council on how those funds that were withheld would be repaid back to the housing trust fund.
Just to add a point of clarity here for members, so the housing trust fund that's being referred to here is not something we have jurisdiction over. It's something for us to know about, because what we do hopefully will work. Hopefully there's going to be some overall city plan that brings all of these elements, but that money is, that fund is primarily funded by the increase in the sales advice to the city on those funds. And because it's general funding, the city council did take $47.2 million from there to primarily help fund the Euler settlements. And there is a program for getting those repaid, but based on everything I've heard, there's not a whole lot of about that actually happening, which is unfortunate, but that's part of the background that led to this Measure GS, because it is a voter initiative. This money cannot be used for any purposes other than those that are set in the measure, and the only people who have the power to change this measure are the people of Santa Monica, not the city council.
So maybe I'll back up to just say thank you so much for providing this, because I think that this is super informative, right? And then I think it's helpful as we think about the GS dollars, not the GSH, but the GS dollars, right, that are going to be targeted to affordable housing production. And I think this prioritization around the city-owned sites is also kind of interesting and challenging. I understand why the city would do that, but those projects are so far away. That, right, like I think it makes me feel like back to urgency, right? It makes me feel like, you know, maybe we need to get our GS dollars over to the city and make some recommendations so that while we're waiting for the city-owned site projects to happen, we can be producing other affordable housing. So whatever, maybe that's another agenda item, but.
Or if we could somehow use the GS dollars to push those things.
Hang on,
further.
David, put you on the list. Because Bruce is next.
But just wanted to, just something Vice Chair Anderson mentioned, so the city-owned sites, the notice of availability for two that were identified in the housing element, one that was not, those were, those letters of interest were provided to staff by the developers earlier, I guess by September. So those are right now going through this surplus land act process, and there'll be updates about those as they go to state.
And Natalie, you know that, I mean, just thinking about the EAH project on 4th Street, it took 5 years to get to a DDA. So those projects take a long time.
Oh, no, I'm definitely aware of that. But I also will say that one just was a special one with COVID, you know, paused that process, the coastal commission, but
I don't know how special it is.
not special. But I mean, all of them do take that long. So I
All of them
don't know.
take too long, how about that?
Huh?
All of them take too long.
Hopefully.
Okay, Bruce is next.
I just want the committee to know, this is, the council was told that we're gonna tell them what to do with this money, that our committee's gonna do that, so we have work to do. It says, you know, the resident oversight committee will be providing recommendations on how to use this money at a future date. So we better calendar that. I know what Wade wants to do, which he wants to get rid of the pickleball court and build the housing there. But I mean, we're behind, not behind, but we've spent a lot of time on flexible financial assistance, the right to counsel, and understanding programs. Brainstorming and how to spend the money, we haven't done a lot of that, so I guess.
We're gonna get to 13B and talk about that.
Ray, if you wanna be on the list, you can be on the list, but given the size of our commission, we have to go in order. So David's next, then myself, and then you.
I was going to ask about homelessness came up. How about the people that are living in their cars? Is somebody keeping track of that? Are they considered, I mean, technically they don't have a home, you know? So I would think that should be part of the homelessness initiative. I don't know exactly where it would fall, but that would be something that, you know, the city.
It's part of the point in time count that annually, and then it is part of their portfolio. I can't speak to the specific program though.
I could speak to that. I lived in my car. If you have an address with one of these non-government organizations, people concerned, then they will count you as. But they won't always be counted because your car might not be there. They count the people in February before 10 o'clock. Anyway, we can't sure. But you can register an address with one of the non-government organizations here in Santa Monica.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm next. So a couple of things. So when we had our first meeting, there was a general view of the 6 people were here that most people didn't know very much about what was going on already in the city, and until we had that base of common knowledge, it was kind of difficult then to go to the point you're talking about, Bruce, which is so, because we have to fit into whatever else is going on. We only have control. We only have jurisdiction over this pot of money and its things, but to make sense, it needs to fit into the overall framework that the city is doing. So that's why other things we have somewhat of this, all these different groups, each of which have a piece of it. They're at least coordinated. You know, you have Housing Commission over here, you have us, you have the CS Commission, you have, you know, all of these things floating around. So trying to pull that together into something that's coherent is important. I think we need some of the background. As to the specific thing that you're raising, so the EH thing is a real concern of mine. I mean, Renee and I were on the Housing Commission back in, I think they first came to us in 2017, and we were talking about city-owned land, and this was the first one, and it went to council in 2018. And then the RFP went out in 2019, and then it was interrupted by that. But even since then, when the thing was awarded, that was now years ago, and nothing has moved forward on that. That is not inherent in public land. Hollywood Housing Corp got its RFP about a year ago. They've already applied for and actually got granted tax credits. Unfortunately, somebody sued them.
Exactly.
And so they had to win the legal fight first. Well, but that could happen on anything.
It takes a long time.
Right, but it takes a long time. That could happen on any project, whether it's a CCSM project, a work organization, any of them. So if the neighbor sued, claimed that there wasn't adequate, CEQA and those other things. So there's nothing inherent about that. To me,
I would like to understand what it is we have lined up. And so when you say that we have the money, there are two things. What is it that the Housing Trust Fund, you can answer this, Natalie, what is it, these commitments, what are they? So,
Yeah, so Virginia Avenue, which we're gonna be closing on the loan shortly for that, those commitments, and then it's Hollywood, two developments by Hollywood on Euclid and 14th Streets. Excuse me, sorry, only one of them requires a commitment. It would be, Euclid has a loan commitment on that site. And then, the former parking structure 3, EH has a loan commitment as well that's not been executed.
okay, so that's what, so the 27 million that's committed.
22.5 million.
Oh, well, I was just looking here, it says less card commitments, 27 million.
Sorry, which page are you?
Oh,
Oh,
this chart.
okay, apologize. So this, though, how this is projected is, the commitments are going into the outflows when we're anticipating that they're gonna be actually, committed by loan agreements.
No, I understand.
Oh.
Virginia Avenue rehab,
Yes,
the additional funding that's required for the Hollywood housing projects.
yes.
And some additional funding that's required for the EAH project.
Not EAH on that one, I believe, yeah, so EAH, Hollywood Housing, and then also the staffing as well as part of the commitments.
And Virginia Avenue.
And Virginia, yes.
Okay, so at least the public land that we've already had gone through the RFP process and whatever,
It's already factored.
but we have enough money in the housing trust fund that those projects can go forward.
Correct, yes.
Subject to getting the tax credits.
And the other
Or the
financing.
HSC.
Yes.
Okay, got that. And then also this the pod program, correct?
Correct, so the pod program is factored in already and as part of that.
Okay, and that's gonna be continuing, and the city council authorized an expansion to 3 million, did we expand it?
So we're in the process of expanding it, so we haven't fully utilized the $3 million, and we're in the process of expanding the eligibility dates to ensure more folks are part of that program. But we have surpassed previously, it was, our cap was 200 seniors, and we have surpassed that.
Household.
Yes.
Okay, and then, so then you said, now we've put out all those other, whatever they're called now, not RFPs, letter of interest
Notice
or
of
whatever.
availability.
What's the time frame under which that's gonna play itself out?
So under the surplus law, or so for everyone, the housing element identified 5 city-owned sites that were going to be prioritized for affordable housing. 2 of them have already gone through the RFP process. That's the Wilshire parking lots on Euclid and 14th and former parking structure 3. And then there's 3 remaining sites, 2 of which we did what's called a notice of availability that are subject to the state's surplus land act, which is very prescriptive in how we, what we can and can't do. So those 2 sites are 4th and 5th Arizona, the Bergamot Art Station, were identified in the housing element, and then we also have included parking structure 1 in the downtown as part of that. So that we've started the surplus land act process as part of those, and we now have to have at least 90 days of negotiation with all of the developers that have submitted letters of interest.
And, so what's sort of the time frame in which we would know whether, in order to get the affordable housing that housing element is talking about, whether it's going to be able to support itself through some, for example, building market rate housing, and then
So
also that, or we're going to have to supplement it with additional funding to make those happen?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So part of the 90-day negotiation period, that's where we're going to be fleshing that out, bringing it to council and getting better sense of those items. That doesn't mean after 90 days we'll have a development for those sites. We just have to negotiate for at least 90 days with every developer that submits. So I'm hopeful after that 90 days we'll have somewhat of a sense what this development will yield and with how much or how little housing trust funds would be needed.
And so oftentimes when they do these negotiations, then they do it in closed session. So they basically cut the public completely out of all of this. Is that how this is gonna go too? Or is the public gonna know what came back from these developers and what was proposed before council?
No,
decides on it?
yeah, that's a great question. I actually have to check with the city attorney's office on the SLA process of what can be open and what can't be open. So I can't speak to that right now.
Okay. No, hang on, I was just trying to remember whether there was anything else on that for me before I passed the baton. Well, if there was, it'll come up later. Okay, go ahead, Wayne, you're up.
David, I had a question about all those, city, properties that you guys were going over. Is there an estimate in terms of how many units, like how many seniors could we actually house in one of those? Or is that all dependent on the developers, and if the developer decides to put in, I don't know, depending on
I understand.
what the density is, okay.
The answer is that when they send out the RFPs, they are approving a specific project to be there. So what's been, so there is an approved project for each of those sites. It might change slightly, you know, at the margins, but the city council has approved specific things for specific populations and, you know,
So
specific number of units, specific numbers of bedrooms for specific populations.
Okay, so we know the number of units, the ones that are
Well, that's different.
RFP approved.
Right.
However, the ones that are not RFP approved, we don't know the units, correct?
What we know is what, in the housing element, we said we thought was a reasonable number of units that we could create there. What they told the developers is, that's what we want you to be able to create there, but whether, when it comes back, that is or isn't possible, how we will finance it, et cetera, is what this whole sort of, for us, black box process is deciding. But there is an estimate, and as Amy was just pointing out, it's in this report, what you have there. But that's not that's different from an RFP where they actually approve a specific, you know, building size and number of units.
Correct, but the two of them are already RFP approved.
Yes.
So we already have an exact number. This, the other sites, there might be some variation, but I wouldn't expect the variation to be more than 10% to what is already estimated by council and by the city.
I think it's gonna depend, and this is where this does actually directly impact us, is in order to achieve those goals, how much additional financing is the city gonna have to put in on top of everything else they're doing? And that will be a function of what's in the housing trust fund, but even when they're not diverting the money, you know, the measure GSH 2016 is only roughly $8 million a year. $3 million of it is going to the Preserve Our Diversity program, so that only leaves about $5 million there. This 2022 measure, GS, is going to be a larger source of that additional public funding, if that's what's required, and if that's what city council decides. We, before that, can study it, recommendations about what we think ought to be done. The other thing that's going on, and this is another topic for another time, but the whole way that the city has now adjusted the affordable housing inclusionary program could potentially be generating some money. And anyway, it's a very complex process, but the bottom line is, the ones that have already gone out to RFP, we know what that's going to be. These ones, we know what the target is, but we'll see whether we can actually pull it off or not.
I was just going to add one small little thing about the fund. You were saying it depends on how much additional funds the city's gonna need to add, depending on, when they negotiate with the developers that are gonna build those properties. Is there any way that the city could negotiate with the developer instead of giving funds, maybe giving like a tax credit or some other, it's still funds, but it's not directly capital or direct cash flow that's in a fund. You understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but.
For the financing of the project.
Yeah, if there's a true affordable housing project, it's already exempt from property taxes. If it's used as tax credits and it's structured in the proper way, and that's basically the only tax that there really is, that we get any share of, so, no. This is, I think, my answer to that question, but, okay, wait, you were next on the list.
So with all of your questions about the different the projects, figure out which ones that we could actually get money to make it happen faster. Are any of those, we'd be able to help any of those happen faster by putting money in it now?
Well, it sounds like what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, is that based on the city's estimates of the additional funding that's required for the 3 sites that already have RFPs, it's already covered by what's in the Housing Trust Fund that's not ours. They wouldn't need any GS money, any 2022 GS money for that. So then there's this whole, another set of properties that it's different. It's not an RFP, it's a negotiation because of the change in state law. And we don't have any idea right now, because except for Natalie and some people, none of us have seen the responses, and even to the extent they've seen the responses, then there's this whole negotiation period. So we have no idea. To Amy's point, at some point, if it's 3 years or 4 years in the future, then you could say, okay, well, we think that we're going to have revenue coming in that will be in place at that time. So the revenue we have now, we're better off spending on something else. If it was, you're going to tell us in 3 months that they're about to go out to tax credits and whatever, it might be. I'm not saying it would be, but it could be a different decision. That's why, at least for me, I was curious what we think the time frames are, which we're going to know anything about that. So that's the best I can say on that topic.
And
Yes, no, you're.
I think the other thing that's laid out in the info item is there are potential opportunities. And I think this would be great to hear from this committee because Metro, recently announced the 7th Street in Colorado, which they are dedicating for affordable housing, and so there's an opportunity there for providing Metro GS or the city housing trust funds to that. I think the other opportunity if you wanted to move funds very quickly is through the incorporate the Measure GS funds into the city's housing trust fund guideline and have it be part of the over-the-counter process. That would be another way to very quickly expedite those funds. Measure GS committee members could be part of the loan committee review process as well. I just wanted to highlight.
Can I ask you a question about that? So I understood that there already was some, so I thought CCSM was already in partnership with somebody to build on Metro sites.
Yeah, they just
I thought they awarded it already. So do we know that there is a need for any additional money?
They have signaled to staff that there is a need. Yeah.
So, I think what would be helpful,
And
if we can say it under this item, if not, when we get to the future meeting, it would be helpful to know what are specifically those other things and when are we going to know about these other projects and how much would they need. Metro's a good one because that's public land too, which means that you know, one of the points of the public land is, if we have to take our money to buy the land, then it's cost more per unit to create it than if we're putting it on our existing land. Metro, since they're providing the land, is public land, so I don't know what difference does it make whether it's the city's public land or that. I'm hoping someday, we've supposedly been asking, we're gonna convince the state that the DMV site in Colorado and Cloverfield, there's this massive thing, the entire thing on it is this little, you know, one-story building for people to sit in there. It's a complete waste of space, and would be a great place to put affordable housing, and you could have on the first floor a little piece of it at the DMV. You know, so I don't care whose public land it is, but that's the advantage of doing public land, is we're not going out and buying the land, which means we're taking more dollars. So if there are like a list of things like that, maybe a report at our next meeting,
Beyond,
what those would be helpful.
yeah, in the Housing Trust Fund, it does signal like the metro sites, well, and San Michelle, but, you know, I think the challenge is knowing they're in the ENA process of just knowing what we can share and what we can at this point. So, I can work with my metro colleagues to see what we can and can't share.
Well, we'll talk about it again when we get to what the next meeting is, but I guess, to me, the point of having this information is in order to understand where the Measure GS money is best utilized, requires knowing what's the panoply of things out there, what's already being covered by the money from other sources, and then go from there to make a decision depending on, or make a recommendation, we don't decide anything, based on that information. Okay, did you have something else you want to say this before we move to the next one?
I'll wait till 13B. I'm waiting for 13B.
Okay, we're gonna get there, promise, okay. Next up, we're on 13A, and Bruce did some independent data gathering about our revenue, not just the overall numbers, but sort of where it came from, which he shared, and I thought that's something everybody would want to hear, so Bruce was kind enough to give us a little presentation on that.
And to follow up on Mark's earlier question, and David's, if it's over 8 million and you're transferring property, 5% of the money goes to the city. It doesn't make any, it could be vacant land, it could be a hotel, it could be an office building, it could be a single family house. And so in year one, it was 28 million, but 10 goes to the schools, so there was 18 left over. Year two, it was 24 million, 10 million went to the schools, 14 million left over. So with Natalie's new numbers, we're halfway through year three, and 16 million has come in. And so 10 million has gone to the schools, and so there's a leftover 6. In the next 6 months,
What was your number?
Is it me or the numbers are decreasing?
and in year one, there was a $185 million office building or something that changed hands. So that was a huge chunk of the money in year one. Year two is that there was a $130 million building, and that was a huge chunk of the money. So far this year, there's been one $40 million transfer, so there hasn't been a $100 million plus. And so in a year where you have $100 million plus, you get an extra $5 million on $100 million. And that jacks up your numbers. If it's not there, then you're gonna have a bad year. But we will have, at some point by March of next year, we'll have 3 years of transfers under our belt to kind of see what happens. But it does mean there is money coming in and there is money to spend, and so that's my point, that we should start spending it.
Were there questions or comments on this one?
Is-
Anybody?
is that,
Wait, hang on, just before you go, I want to get the list. Anybody other than Wade? I'll put myself. Go ahead, Wade.
That's an account and is gaining interest?
I don't exactly know where the money is.
It's, it is in the city account, which
we can't know, none of us can know where it is.
Is it possible to move it?
No, because it's in city accounts. The city goes through a large procurement process for its accounts.
So, okay, I'll put you on after me, Mark. So I think one of the important things that what Bruce is telling us, which is consistent with the HRNA study that was done before the measure went on the ballot, where they looked back 10 years. And they said, well, if we just assume that the sales that happened in the prior 10 years would have happened anyway, where would the money have come from and how much would it be? And so one of the important things that we see from that is in those 10 years, 1 year would have been as low as 15.5 million, and another year, the high year would have been 120 million. So there's huge variability, and it's because of exactly what Bruce said. We're a little city. LA's this big city going back to what Measure ULA does. So there's more transaction volume going to be going on all the time. With us being so small, 1 or 2 really big transfers has a huge impact on that. So there's that uncertainty in what we do. The second thing that's of interest is that one of the things, and we'll talk about this probably next meeting, but the city council has been working hard to come up with a program that would allow developers to go ahead despite current high interest rates, despite the potential construction labor shortage that's being created by some of the immigration issues, despite the materials costs that have been going up in general, and they're now, some of them subject to tariffs, some may go up even more, and paying the GS tax a way to make it so that people would go forward, because we have something like 4,000 units of housing that have their entitlements. It's by private developers, but have not yet been started because of all of these headwinds. And they've taken action on that, and a combination of the fact that as long as nobody messes with GS, when they sell those burglary projects, we'll be getting money, but also put in that a requirement's going to be that people agree that, and if somehow political wins in Sacramento or other things take it away, they'll pay the money, equivalent money anyway. So there is down the road reason to think that we will start having not just these sort of random things, but a lot more of a pipeline of things going through that will generate money. But that's probably at least 5 years down the road till those things start maturing to that part. But that will hopefully a little bit smooth out our receipts. It will still be if somebody sells a big office building or a big, I think you said you live at the Sea Colony, right? So if the Sea Colony were sold, that's a huge, project that would be worth a lot of money, and the 5% would be a lot. So there'll still be a lot of variability, but we may, hopefully, we'll have a pipeline going forward that will give us a higher base than we have under current circumstances where there's very little activity like that.
Yeah, but they were just saying that at least in LA County, to compare to what I understand, we're a much smaller, area, but for what they estimated they were gonna get on the mansion tax to what they got was maybe 10 to 20%. Let's say they expected to get $1 billion and they got 10% of that, so they got 100 million. So just because the real estate volume for the last couple of years, especially in those, let's say $10 million or above properties, whether commercial or residential, or however you want to call it, has just not traded and gone down, have gone down. That's why when they compare it to historical numbers, when they thought they're gonna put this in and it was gonna give them $1 billion, and instead they got, whatever, 300 million or something like that.
Well, So you're certainly right, we're in a bad time in the real estate cycle. LA is now, this year, they're going to be spending 450 million a year, so it is recovering.
No, no, it's better.
And all of that, but you're certainly right that we're in particular bad times.
No, and the fire also hurt us, all those Palisades houses, they would have, I mean, it doesn't help Santa Monica, but in general, it just, that didn't help.
It's very volatile, even for them, I think they estimated a range of between 600 million and 1.2 billion or something like that, so even in LA, it was very volatile, and it's been volatile, anyway.
Well, they found a way to borrow $3 billion for the civic center.
Wait.
Oh, yeah.
We have to go in order here, so Mark was next. If you
I
want
just,
to John.
comment for, you talked about, it's in city accounts, it'd be interesting and helpful to know how the money is invested. Because one of the things as a committee overseeing the fund is we want to make sure we maximize any interest or revenue or return that we get on money that isn't being spent.
Yeah.
So when we get this report that David was talking about that comes from the city manager, for some reason, some rule, like he attaches that we have $700 million in the bank, and then it shows interest is being paid. So I assume our money is part of that $700 million. I don't know whether they're crediting us the interest, but that would
No,
be good.
they probably are, but we shouldn't be getting.
David, let's let Mark finish.
Right, and that's just, it would help my question.
Okay, Wade's next, and then David.
Oh, wait. I just said, you were saying how bad their real estate market is in Los Angeles. They borrowed $3 billion to expand their civic center, right? So that they're finding ways to do what they want to do. And that's what every city finds, ways to build the things that are important to them. And that's, well,
Because the city is 100 billion over budget, and now they're gonna be 200 billion over budget for the next 10 years because of the civic center.
Well, that's LA's problem, not ours.
No.
Exactly. So-
But I was just gonna piggyback on Mark's point, is it would be nice if, since, I mean, obviously we wanna spend the money because of how real estate works, and we wanna build this housing with a snap of our fingers. But if we have millions of dollars in this GS fund, and we should be getting a daily rate of return of 10%, instead we're getting 0.01% in some savings account, we're losing money. Every day we're speaking, we met today at the meeting, our fund lost money.
So,
We lost money just sitting here talking about
Well,
okay, guys.
David, we don't know, that's why I asked the
Right,
question.
so that would be, so now we're up to item 13B, we're almost there, 13C, we'll be able to do it. So, is there anything that the legal assistance and flexible financing subcommittee wants to report?
No.
Okay, I'll just, for the, David and Mark, you might, so there were two committees, subcommittees that we formed, which could have new members if people end up deciding to vote. So one was a subcommittee that's been looking at the programs you heard about tonight, and that's been Bruce and
Anuja.
yeah, Jimmy Burton, so I can see his name, thank you. Anuja and Renee, and then we formed a second one, which was affordable housing production subcommittee, which is me and Renee, but others could join. So that's what they're preparing a PowerPoint, although we're giving it a 9, I'm glad they didn't. But I've been working on trying to keep the money flowing to us, but we'll do next time. But the basic point being, besides from what do we do with this money, what creative ways are there to use the money in a more effective manner than just traditional affordable housing? The two most promising to me nature of what we build or all of those things, but more on, can we do a real social housing where we have mixed, not just lower income, but cross-subsidized by others, that model, is that something that can be developed, that our money can be used to help do that, but it would require less of a subsidy because there's some cross-subsidization there, so that's one thing I'd like to see work on. And the other is there a way we can attract more private capital into doing this? There are people who do that, and could we use some of the money that we have here to change the economics enough in Santa Monica that the people who are doing private capital, affordable housing, and other places would say it's too hard to do here. We could induce them to do here again at a per unit subsidy rate that's lower. So those are two of the things I'm personally interested in or looking at. But to the new members of the, I guess we want to say, think about whether either of those or there's something else that you think we got to form a subcommittee on that you're interested in, and you can express some interest. Add members as a tech, we have to agendize that. So if you have some thoughts, let us know, and we can agendize it for the next meeting. Okay, so now we're on the thing that we've kind of been dancing around. It's the last thing, which is future agenda. So this is the time to talk about what is it we want to, have on the agenda, either at the next meeting or
Sure.
future.
To your point, do you want to include voting for new subcommittee members in the next agenda?
Yes, let's put that on there so we have the opportunity to do it if it turns out nobody wants to. Vote either to add to or to create new ones. Okay. So one thing we said we do want, and so maybe Natalie can answer for us by the next meeting, how the money is invested, and do we get interest in how all that works and why it is, whatever it is, because I'm sure it's not in a high yield interest bearing account or whatever. Why that, for example, since FDIC only covers $200 million for this item?
Yes.
Okay, so
So I have where is it invested, why, and how much is it earned? Is that the question? Okay, just wanna make sure.
is that earning be credited to the
And I know-
GS fund?
And I know, to the chair, I know, Natalie, that there are in city accounts, but what are our options? What options are available in the city accounts would be helpful.
Okay. I mean, that too.
Okay, so now, wait, we wanted to talk about this issue.
Okay.
Future, what we want to cover.
Future, yes. And you were just talking about subcommittees. Would we talk about the different kinds of subcommittees when we're voting for, or should we propose a subcommittee now? I was talking about
You can
a
propose it
subcommittee.
now, we just can't create it now. because
Okay,
it's
I was talking about a
future
subcommittee
meetings.
to go around to see the shelters that we have in place, how many beds and how the quality of the shelters and stuff like that in Santa Monica. A subcommittee like that. I would also like to propose that we rebuke the city council. You were talking about how good it is to have city property and make it easy to build affordable housing on city property. We should rebuke them for voting to not even study whether they should use 192 acres of land for any affordable housing. And that 192 acres of land is the airport, and they want to use it all as a great part. I understand it was voted like that in 2014, but of a housing crisis, and to not use some of that land for affordable housing is inhumane and is irresponsible. And for them not to even study it, we should rebuke them and say, listen, we're trying to figure out ways to make affordable housing here in Santa Monica. You're making it difficult by not even doing that study.
Let's see.
Mark?
We get to Wade's point, I mean, I think that's, we talk about all these programs, and my concern is, as I heard from the chair, we need to know what's going on in these various programs, and Wade's point about expanding parkland, that's important to the city, but it's also important to the city to increase affordable housing. So is there an opportunity to have that dialogue? The other thing is, it seems like it would be helpful to take some time to set what the committee's expectations are going forward, writ large, because I think we can get sidetracked too often if we don't sort of set, I hesitate to use the term mission, but to look at the statute, to look at the voter-initiated GS program and say, what do we as a committee expect that program to do in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 3 years, so that we set some expectations that we share with council to say, here, you know, we expect you to take these seriously, and here's what we expect to happen with the money that we've raised through this initiative. So that's just, whether it's a work group, a task force, a subcommittee, what have you, to just kind of have that focus.
Amy, you're next.
I'm hoping that at the next meeting or soon, we can begin to really have a conversation about making recommendation to council on the affordable housing production dollars. Because in my own experience, developers won't come forward with new proposals for affordable housing development if they don't see available financing resources. And so whether it's city-owned sites or a developer finding a property to develop on the market, I think it would be important to signal to the community that there are more dollars than $2 million available. So getting money over, getting council to make more money available with the GS dollars rather than.
Any other? Wade?
I think I put this on some list at some point, but what about Long Beach was selling tiny houses that they weren't using, and during the pandemic, we had those fabricated, or I think trailers maybe. Can we look into trailers on Santa Monica property? And, you know, I know it's temporary housing, but could we be able to do something like that? So something that we could actually see some progress being made quickly. Or the trailers.
Okay.
We have to have the area where whatever city property, we have to have an area that can house however many of those prefab homes you want to do, but it'll all depend on the size of that area. I think it was brought up, the one on Cloverfield, and if we can get that area, I think that could work there. But I don't know if we can, get that all approved and done.
How about
That belongs to the state, so.
How about until they start building on 4th Street, we replace the pickleball courts with some trailers for people to live in? How about that? That would be a step in the right direction. That would be saying, hey, we're trying.
Okay, well, I think this is helpful. Amy and I will work with staff and we'll come up with an agenda for the next meeting. I do want to reiterate the point that I think we made in our first meeting we made earlier today, which is, we actually have a specific mandate under the statute, and while all of the issues relating to homelessness and affordable housing are all of great interest probably to all of us here, ultimately our role is principally to advise how the money that this
hearing is that people are feeling like now they have a better sense of what's going on in the city, so we may be able to start having some discussions about other things. I mean, it's, anyway, so I hear that that's, people are starting to feel like we can move towards that. We'll see how we can structure
Just
that.
one more. I would propose that we, whatever program they have in place to get the money to the people for the eviction program, whatever that's in, we get the money in there soon. I would ask that they lower the qualification to 80% of average income. Because somebody who's making $130,000 a year, they might need the help, but they should be they should find help somewhere else. I think.
So the way it's written, the funding part, legal representation goes up to 100%.
Does that sound reasonable? 120% just sounds like we're helping people that are making pretty good amount of money and that they might have other resources.
Well, I think that that people in that income group actually do need assistance when they're having fights with their landlords, but they don't have easy alternative. I guess the other thing, I want to clarify something else I said in there, and it goes to some of what Bruce was talking about, all of this. We wouldn't have any money at all, except for the fact that we were able to convince the majority of the voters in Santa Monica to do this. And so, what one as an individual might choose as if you were the sole ruler, how to do things, is not necessarily the same as what if you want to build a majority coalition in the city of voters to give us the resources you would do. So I personally think that the combination of things here was part to make sure that we had a winning coalition in this city, and I do think that there is a real need for people in that legal support, and I think, as I mentioned last time, I hear from lots of people who will share where the priority needs to be with things. I do hear from significant numbers of people saying, well, why is it only helping those people because I have problems too? And so trying to do that.
So expensive. The more you can help them out.
Everyone is a renter.
I make $12,000 a year.
Right, so anyway, but I hear what you're saying, and I think this is helpful, and we'll work on an agenda that will hopefully allow us to have some of these discussions, and we may be one meeting or maybe multiple. The good news is that even though we've been in existence probably since June, we've missed several meetings because we couldn't do a quorum. We missed at least 2 meetings during that time where we didn't have a quorum. So now that we have a quorum, I think we should be able to move forward relatively expeditiously. Okay, so I think that's it, and we're adjourned.
Well,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we can,
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Milan.
Tiny numbers. I was thinking that that's, yes, I agree.
Okay, here's the one you're gonna know.
So,
If you get to read this, it says, like this one.
Yeah, I know.
Most of these.
How long is permanent? How long is permanent? My house always makes it permanent, and it Some buildings only.
And then I'd love to have somebody that actually follow through on this. But
Yeah.
we can have data to show that this is what's really going on to real people. And then the right thing to do is to address this. We have more recent data.
I don't understand why this is. We don't, most of the parking lots are owned by the county.
Oh, Richard, or wasn't he on?
Not as color. That means nothing, I'm gonna give you a nice one.
It's okay, that's why I had to make.
Because people, for the, trailer down on the street,
Then didn't get the information. That's why,
So we, yeah,
That's the way that the information. That's the way it's been measured.
action area, for a long time, but
I mean, it may be
biggest problem is
and people then.
All right, that's the end of that meeting, and
Yeah, put that in.
we just have it on file. Thank you.